You would think his sacrifice bought world peace. But humanity's foolish greed ruins everything. Driven to the brink by their own stupidity, mankind faced ruin once more. That is, until our fallen hero returned, reborn 42 years later inside a weak teenager's body. Burning with undeniable rage, he swore an absolute oath. He would rise again as the most terrifying awakened being in existence. Armed with a fist that could shatter the heavens, our epic saga begins on day 5691 after the Great Cataclysm. Deep within the abyssal dungeon of the Black Tomb, desperate voices echoed through the darkness, crying out for their master. They pleaded with Jung-woo to stay awake, to keep his eyes open. But the legendary leader was bathed in his own blood. Coughing violently, the shattered warrior forced his heavy eyelids open. With trembling breath, he asked for the raid's final status. One of his loyal comrades broke down in agonizing tears. Behind them towered the colossal corpse of a nightmare. The monstrous beast lay dead. Through their sobs, his guildmates declared the subjugation a complete success. A faint, blood-stained smile graced Jung-woo's face. They had actually done it. Gigantia had finally fallen. It took 3 agonizing years of hunting. Mountains of corpses and countless sacrifices paved the way to this moment. But victory was theirs. They had conquered the impossible. His panicked subordinates begged their invincible leader to hold on, just until the healers arrived. But as Jung-woo glanced downward, he saw the devastating truth. The entire lower half of his body had been obliterated. Turning to his trusted vice-captain, he softly ordered her to protect what remained of their family. His final smile was one of pure, heartbreaking relief. He whispered that humanity could finally step into tomorrow. As the light faded from his vision forever, he let out a dying sigh, whispering a gentle apology to them all. Jung-woo, South Korea's absolute strongest combatant, the man who built the foundation of their world, the very architect of the subjugation system. He breathed his last breath after destroying humanity's greatest threat. Smack. Out of nowhere, a sharp sting struck a boy's neck. A gang of bullies sneered at him. Barking orders, they demanded to know why he didn't fetch their break-time snacks. They mocked his pitiful state, asking if the little rat was trying to starve his superiors. They threatened to beat some respect into his skull. Blinking in absolute bewilderment, the boy felt a surge of ancient irritation. Why was he sitting in a high school classroom? Jung-woo's mind flashed back to the moment of his death. He remembered plunging into an endless, suffocating abyss. A sinister voice had echoed in the dark, mocking his futile sacrifice. As he floated in the void, wondering if this was the afterlife, the mysterious entity's words had ignited a roaring fury within him. It laughed, claiming humanity was utterly defenseless now, with no one left to stop the monster tides. Burning with legendary wrath, Jung-woo roared back. He had forged the ultimate system, a legacy that would birth countless supreme hunters. New titans would rise to protect the world. The entity merely chuckled at his naive faith in the system. It softly whispered, 42 years. A cryptic time frame that left the fallen hero completely baffled. The unearthly voice promised him a second chance, a rebirth exactly 42 years in the future, daring him to see if his precious hope would actually become reality. Seething with untamed rage, Jung-woo continued his descent into nothingness. Spitting venom, he swore that this omnipotent being was nothing but a cowardly cockroach hiding in the shadows, a pathetic pest that needed to be crushed. Suddenly, a gasp for air. The legendary hunter slowly peeled his eyes open. Total confusion washed over him as the abyss vanished. What in the world was going on? He frantically scanned his surroundings, his mind racing at 1,000,000 miles an hour. He remembered his body being torn apart by the monstrous Gigantia. Glancing at a nearby reflection, his breath hitched. A completely foreign face stared back at him. Mind reeling in disbelief, he traced his trembling fingers across his jawline. He was trapped inside a teenager's body, and it wasn't even his own childhood face. Before he could process this terrifying reincarnation, knock, knock, a sudden noise snapped him back to reality. He flinched, instinctively shifting into a combat stance. He was sitting in a blindingly white hospital ward. A doctor and a stern-looking man walked in, sighing in relief that the patient was finally awake. The stranger flashed a shiny badge. Declaring himself a police officer, he pulled out a notepad. He gently asked the teenager to explain the terrifying details of his recent case. A case? What case? The reborn hero was hit with a tidal wave of confusion. The detective began reading off the boy's registered profile, confirming his legal name, current age, and date of birth. stating he was born in 2035. Jung-woo furrowed his brows in utter annoyance. He firmly corrected them, declaring his true birth year was 1975. The detective and the doctor exchanged deeply concerned glances. Was this kid suffering from brain damage? Brushing off the crazy statement, the officer pressed on, trying to extract the violent events that triggered his hospitalization. Jung-woo deadpanned. He calmly explained that his catastrophic injuries were sustained while slaying the colossal Gigantia, deep within the nightmare-inducing black tomb. The two adults stared at him like he had grown a second head. Whispers filled the room as they debated the boy's mental stability. Did the severe trauma shatter his fragile mind? The physician sighed, suggesting the boy desperately needed heavy rest. The detective pulled the doctor aside, his voice laced with pity, asking if the poor kid genuinely suffered from awakened hunter delusions. The doctor nodded solemnly. Escapism through fantasy was a common symptom of extreme psychological delirium. Completely fed up, our reincarnated protagonist demanded answers. What on earth were they whispering about? The officer stepped forward, his eyes full of sympathy. Did the boy truly block out the horrific trauma? He explained that Jung-woo was brutally ambushed by a violent street gang yesterday. Since the vicious beating occurred in the dead of night, not a single witness or security camera caught the culprits. The detective gave him one last pleading look, hoping a shred of memory survived. But the boy's eyes held only absolute bewilderment. Sighing in defeat, the officer snapped his notebook shut. He assured the traumatized teen that they could pause the grueling interrogation for today. Sliding a sleek business card onto the bedside table, he urged the boy to call the station the moment his memories returned. As the detective left, the physician checked the monitors and advised the young patient to fall into a deep sleep. But before the doctor could exit the room, a desperate voice stopped him. With a sudden rush of anxiety, Jung-woo asked the most critical question. What exact year is it right now? The doctor froze, turning back with a look of pure pity. He couldn't comprehend how a beating could cause such profound amnesia. Yet, he gently answered the troubled boy. It is March 1st, 2051. The words struck Jung-woo like a devastating thunderbolt. Impossible. Trembling with sheer disbelief, he tore open the hospital room's curtains. His jaw hit the floor. What in heaven's name was he looking at? The Seoul he remembered was a terrifying wasteland, a shattered graveyard completely obliterated by apocalyptic monster wars, a hellscape overflowing with starving refugees, where helpless civilians rotted away in the streets, plagued by incurable diseases and constant hunger. But staring out the window, his reality completely shattered. The metropolis standing before him was a utopia of gleaming steel and glass. Towering skyscrapers pierced the clouds in a world untouched by despair. Peaceful streets, healthy citizens, families walking together with bright smiles. Seeing this absolute miracle, the main character burst into laughter. Tears streamed down his face, completely uncontrollable. He muttered that it felt like a dream, yet he had no choice but to believe his own eyes. People were actually living normal, peaceful lives. The memories of his fallen comrades flooded his mind. Jung-woo wondered if his old friends were still alive. He prayed that after these 42 long years, they had finally found peace together. But suddenly, a terrifying memory flashed through his mind. The voice of that mysterious entity. A cold sweat washed over him. He realized that the exact amount of time the entity promised had actually passed. Out of nowhere, a deafening crash shattered the peace. Emergency sirens echoed through the streets, blaring a desperate warning. A massive disaster had just erupted at the local university hospital. A colossal portal ripped through the fabric of reality right in the hospital courtyard. Panicked civilians fled in terror, screaming for someone to call the Hunter Association. Sprinting desperately toward the chaos, his heart pounded with wild excitement. After being dead for 42 years, he was finally about to witness a modern raid. He couldn't wait to see how humanity's combat tactics had evolved. But as he arrived at the scene, he stopped dead in his tracks. A massive crowd was just standing there. Confusion washed over him. Why on earth were civilians loitering near an active gate? Then, he heard a soldier addressing the absolute circus of a crowd. The guard proudly announced that an advanced rank hunter was handling the subjugation today. He casually told the civilians to maintain a safe distance, then dropped an absolute bombshell. In exactly 10 minutes, they were going to lure the monster entirely out of the dungeon. Jung-woo's blood ran cold as memories of his past life surged forward. Back in his era, he was the commander who drilled survival into his recruits. He used to scream at them, warning that a monster stepping foot outside a gate meant guaranteed mass destruction. The golden rule of survival was simple. Every single raid had to be concluded inside the portal. It was a fundamental law written in the blood of fallen heroes. His past recruits had sworn their lives to that rule. Now, watching this absolute madness, irritation boiled in his veins. He shoved his way through the crowd. He muttered that modern hunters had completely lost their minds. Dozens of reporters were literally setting up cameras for a live broadcast. Unable to hold back, he roared at them. He screamed, asking what kind of suicidal stunt they were trying to pull. His frustration erupted as he demanded to know why they were willingly letting a beast out of the gate. Startled onlookers murmured, wondering why this kid was throwing such a dramatic tantrum. Jung-woo sneered, yelling that hunting monsters wasn't some child's play. Gathering an audience for a deathmatch was pure insanity. But before he could finish, the crowd erupted into deafening cheers. A luxurious white van rolled up to the scene. The door slid open, and a young girl stepped out like an absolute superstar. She wielded an elegant sword, and the paparazzi immediately begged for her attention. Jung-woo stared in absolute disbelief. Were these really the so-called elite hunters of the modern era? He narrowed his eyes, analyzing the incredibly young girl before him. He couldn't help but question what kind of combat prowess she actually possessed. The fan club screamed her name as Yu confidently marched toward the swirling vortex. With a simple gesture, she activated her system link. Her hunter bracelet erupted with a blinding, majestic, purple aura. The system granted her ultimate access, unlocking a specialized vault of supreme abilities. But before anyone could blink, the military personnel shouted a warning. The beast was crossing the threshold. The dimensional rift flared violently, spitting out terrifying golden lightning. A colossal, pitch-black claw slammed onto the concrete. A monstrous beast, dripping with pure malice and sporting razor-sharp fangs, emerged from the shadows. Standing before the young girl was a towering, humanoid wolf beast. Without hesitation, she summoned her absolute zero magic, casting a high-tier crystallization spell. The monstrous lycanthrope lunged at her with bloodthirsty speed. But she effortlessly sidestepped the brutal strike, countering with a single, graceful swing of her blade. A devastating wave of glacial ice exploded from her sword. The spectators watched in awe, gasping that her lethal combat skills looked just like an elegant dance. Starstruck children tugged at their parents' sleeves, begging to become glamorous hunters when they grew up. Watching this, Jung-woo felt a sickening mix of relief and absolute dread. The huntress landed flawlessly on the frozen pavement, the shockwave of her attack still lingering in the air. Without missing a beat, she took a deadly stance once more. She unleashed a relentless barrage of jagged ice shards. The piercing projectiles tore through the beast's flesh, forcing a blood-curdling roar from the monster's throat. Its remaining eye flared with crimson rage as it glared at its executioner. But the absolute zero temperature had already frozen its muscles, completely paralyzing its colossal body. The beast crashed to the ground, dead on impact, just as the girl sheathed her blade. Jung-woo stood frozen, entirely bewildered by the sheer absurdity of the spectacle. The crowd went absolutely feral, screaming her name in a victory frenzy. Jung-woo chuckled dryly, but it wasn't a laugh of relief. It was pure, unadulterated disbelief. He gritted his teeth, his aura turning razor-sharp. He furiously muttered that this wasn't a subjugation at all. It was an absolute, disorganized disaster. To his veteran eyes, this rookie was nothing more than a glorified celebrity. She fought entirely on her own raw talent, while the heavily armed rearguard just stood there like useless props. They didn't provide a single ounce of tactical support, but what infuriated him more than anything else was the sheer, reckless arrogance of the entire operation. They had intentionally lured a walking weapon of mass destruction into a crowded civilian street. Just one tiny mistake could have resulted in an absolute bloodbath. He ground his teeth together, desperately trying to contain his volcanic fury, but the veteran instinct inside him refused to stay quiet. He completely lost his temper. With a fierce kick, he shattered a broadcasting camera into pieces. A heavily armored guard immediately rushed over, demanding to know what on earth the crazy kid was doing. Burning with the authority of a past-life commander, Jung-woo snapped back. He demanded to know what kind of idiots willingly let a dungeon boss walk into the human world. He furiously questioned if they had forgotten that monsters suffer from dimensional maladaptation. Once outside, they go completely berserk in unpredictable ways. He roared at the guard, asking what their backup plan was if a civilian's rogue ability scattered the crowd, or if the beast evolved mid-fight. Furthermore, the so-called rearguard, completely unimpressed, the protagonist questions this so-called dungeon subjugation. To his seasoned eyes, it looks more like a pathetic street performance. The huntress arrogantly asks if he is a student at the academy. Jung-woo tilts his head in utter confusion, prompting her to brag about basic curriculum. She pats his ego, praising his youthful enthusiasm, but coldly warns him that classroom theories mean absolutely nothing in the real world. With a dismissive wave, she lectures him that the true battlefield is far more brutal than any sheltered student could ever comprehend. A battlefield? His aura drops to absolute zero. With bone-chilling killing intent, he demands how a mere brat dares to use that sacred word in his presence. The sheer weight of his bloodlust leaves the so-called huntress paralyzed in terror. Suddenly, 2 security guards rush in, scolding the boy for his disruption. Disgusted by the fanatical crowd mindlessly cheering her on, Jung-woo scoffs. He declares that any true warrior should be deeply ashamed to call herself a hunter with such ridiculously flawed martial arts. Forcing a polite smile to mask her trembling, she mocks that his academy life must be incredibly stressful. Leaving the scene, the baffled protagonist tries to decipher her ridiculous assumptions. Later, he finds himself resting on a secluded bench, lost in profound thought. The ghostly echoes of the system return to him, the divine voice that promised a regression of 42 years, demanding he pray for a better future to unfold. His eyes narrow with grim resolve. If the supreme calamity Gatgana fully resurrects, these modern weaklings will be slaughtered instantly. He needs true power to prepare. A brilliant spark ignites in his mind. He must locate the legendary members of his former squad. But the harsh reality crashes down like a mountain. How could he possibly track down ancient comrades in this unfamiliar era? Then, the puzzle pieces beautifully align. That arrogant girl mentioned an academy. Only one eccentric soul from his era would ever forge a school for cultivators. Bai Wushik. His consciousness drifts back decades. He vividly remembers the day his comrade first pitched this absolutely absurd academy concept. Wushik's voice had echoed with desperate hope. He prayed their bloody war would end, but to prepare the next generation, a specialized institute was absolutely necessary. The passionate comrade had practically begged his commander for a prestigious name. Jung-woo, completely uninterested in titles, had shrugged off the honor. The immortal master had lazily suggested something agonizingly basic. Why not just call it the Korea Hunter Academy and be done with it? His former vice-captain had looked utterly shattered by his master's pathetic naming sense. Snapping back to the present, Jung-woo arrives at the colossal gates. He facepalms in pure despair. The golden letters proudly display the exact, painfully generic name he carelessly threw out decades ago. He gazes up at the ridiculously massive fortress of a school. A sharp voice shatters his awe as a stern guard demands to know his business. The watchman heavily questions if he is a lost freshman. Jung-woo calmly shakes his head, stating he has personal karma to settle within these walls. The guard snorts, warning that if he is just another fanboy hunting for idol uncha, he is wasting his breath. Jung-woo instantly brushes off the nonsense. Instead, the reincarnated master asks for an audience with a man named Wushik. The guard's jaw drops. Is this kid actually asking for the supreme president? The man narrows his eyes suspiciously. Why on earth would a random civilian demand a private meeting with the absolute authority of the academy? Probing further, the guard asks if he is one of the fabled special admission prodigies. Utterly lost by the modern terminology, the protagonist pauses. Deciding to simply play along with fate's script, Jung-woo nods with absolute confidence. The guard's demeanor shifts instantly, commanding the boy to follow him. Yet, the Sovereign of Shadows is bewildered. Why is this mere guard looking at a supposedly elite prodigy with such overwhelming pity? Escorted down the grand halls, the boy suddenly freezes in pure horror. Dominating the corridor is a massive, incredibly majestic portrait of his past self. What is this madness? The guard fiercely shushes him, snapping that rowdy behavior is strictly forbidden in these sacred historical halls. Mortified by his subordinate's fanatical devotion, Jung-woo's soul practically leaves his body. He spots dozens of golden plaques displaying his supposed divine wisdom. One glittering inscription claimed that Commander Jung-woo's ultimate philosophy was 99% grueling effort and 1% divine talent. Sweat beads down his forehead. Did he ever actually spout such cheesy nonsense in his previous life? The cringe is nearly lethal to his pride. They arrive at the highest sanctuary. Manager Park knocks respectfully, announcing his presence. A booming, incredibly familiar voice commands them to enter. Whispering a final warning to behave, the manager bows deeply. He presents the boy to the supreme leader as the highly anticipated special admission student. The aging president strokes his chin, clearly intrigued by this anomaly. With his duty fulfilled, Manager Park bows out, sealing the heavy oak doors shut. Jin-woo's piercing gaze locks onto his grizzled former comrade. Wu-shik steps forward, his spiritual pressure heavy, muttering that the situation simply does not add up. Stopping mere inches away, the old master growls that he never approved any special prodigy this semester. His eyes flash with a dangerous, interrogating aura. Hoping to crush the boy's spirit, the president unleashes his intimidating mana, but the young protagonist simply smirks, casually tossing out his old comrade's first name. The supreme authority of the academy instantly freezes in absolute shock. Jin-woo chuckles, ruthlessly teasing the veteran about how much his face has withered with age. Pointing at his own youthful features, he asks if Wu-shik really cannot recognize his own master. Snapping out of it, the president desperately rushes for the phone. Howling into the receiver, he orders the manager to immediately drag this disrespectful lunatic out of his sanctum, raging about their pathetic security protocols. Just as the old man hangs up, the boy drops a nuclear bomb. He casually asks how the lovely Miss Sun-young is doing these days. The president's breath hitches. Jin-woo smirks, vividly recalling the ruthless woman who spectacularly rejected Wu-shik, leaving the supposed tough guy sobbing like a baby. With a devilish grin, the reincarnated master notes that the romance clearly crashed and burned. Enraged and utterly baffled, Wu-shik violently grabs the boy's collar, demanding to know his true identity. A smirk crept across the boy's face. My, how times have changed, he chuckled. To think the great Wu-shik would dare lay a hand on me. His eyes narrowed into a terrifying, familiar glare. The president froze, completely paralyzed by the overwhelming aura. "You have grown far too bold," the boy whispered. Terrified, the old comrade instantly released his grip. Casually dusting off his uniform, the boy called the mighty president by his first name. "How many times must I teach you this lesson?" he sighed. "Whether you are facing down a horde of demonic beasts, or dominating a room full of arrogant men, if you intend to take control, you must do it flawlessly." At those words, a phantom image overlapped with the boy. Wu-shik gasped, seeing his legendary leader, standing majestically right before his eyes. Memories flooded back to the grim days at the subjugation command base camp. Chaos had erupted in the courtyard. A desperate survivor was screaming his lungs out, driven entirely mad by the apocalypse. The crazed man held a terrified woman at knife point. "Are you all deaf?" he roared, his blade trembling against her neck. "I said bring me rations and antibiotics right now." The great Jung-woo had calmly watched the commotion unfold. Stepping forward, he demanded a situation report. His loyal lieutenant quickly briefed him on the crisis. "Sir, he is in exile," the officer explained. "Banished for harboring a plague, and now demanding our medical supplies." Jung-woo's eyes grew cold. "Is it truly a demonic plague?" he asked. The lieutenant hesitated. "He claims his younger sister is on the verge of death, but we cannot risk a camp-wide infection." The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a sword. The legendary commander remained absolutely silent, his expression unreadable. Then, doing the unthinkable, he began a slow, menacing walk straight toward the desperate hostage-taker. Panic flashed in the attacker's eyes. "Stay back! Do not take another step!" he shrieked, pressing the blade deeper. But Jung-woo did not utter a single word. His footsteps echoed like a death knell. That icy, predatory gaze shattered the man's remaining courage. The hostage sobbed uncontrollably in fear. "Are you crazy?" the man barked. "Do you want me to slaughter her right here?" Jung-woo finally stopped. "Go ahead. Slit her throat," he commanded with chilling apathy. The courtyard plunged into a dead silence. Both the attacker and his victim stared at the commander in sheer disbelief. "We live in a hellscape swarming with monstrous beasts," Jung-woo stated, his voice like winter frost. "One more pathetic death today changes absolutely nothing in this cursed world." "What kind of absolute lunatic are you?" the man stammered, his weapon shaking wildly. Jung-woo tilted his head, his eyes piercing straight through the man's soul. "What is wrong? Have you lost your nerve? I thought you were desperate to save your precious sister," the commander mocked. "If her life truly meant everything to you, you would not hesitate to drown this camp in rivers of blood." The commander's aura flared, dominating the entire space. To pluck one life from the jaws of death, you must be ruthless enough to sacrifice 100 others. That is the brutal reality of the apocalypse. The weak crumble, and the strong devour them. And then, he delivered those legendary words. "If you intend to take control, then do it flawlessly." His killing intent crashed over the desperate survivor like a tidal wave. "But if your resolve is this pitiful, then drop the act before you embarrass yourself further. Make your choice right now," Jung-woo threatened. "Kill her, or prepare to die alongside your diseased sister." Pushed beyond his breaking point, The man let out a primal roar of fury. He aggressively shoved the hostage aside. Driven by pure, unadulterated rage, the exile charged at the commander. He swung his blade with killing intent. But Jung-woo simply shifted his weight, dodging the lethal strike with godlike elegance. In a flash, he seized the attacker's wrist. Using the man's own momentum against him, Jung-woo hurled him through the air. A blood-curdling scream echoed across the base camp. The man slammed violently into the dirt, the earth shuddering beneath the devastating impact. His bones rattled, and agonizing pain shot through every nerve. Yet, fueled by absolute desperation, the exile staggered back to his feet. Spitting blood and gasping for air, he cursed the commander's very existence. Abandoning all logic, the madman launched a second, suicidal assault. A faint smirk graced Jung-woo's lips. Now that is the spirit of a survivor, he praised. Channeling his mana, the commander activated his mythical artifact, the petal ring. With a casual backhand, Jung-woo completely shattered the incoming blade. The attacker froze, absolutely paralyzed by the overwhelming power gap. The commander calmly raised his right hand, pulling his thumb back behind his middle finger. Mana converged at his fingertip, sparking with terrifying intensity. He triggered his ultimate martial technique, the explosive flow. With nothing more than a casual flick of his wrist, a devastating shockwave erupted. The sheer force blasted the attacker through the air like a broken rag doll. He smashed violently against a reinforced concrete wall, spiderweb cracks erupting from the point of impact. Slumping to the ground, the man stared up at the godlike warrior, in total despair. Jung-woo dusted off his hands as if sweeping away garbage. He barked an order, and his loyal lieutenant scrambled to attention. "Deploy an elite search unit immediately," the commander instructed. "Scour the wastelands, find his younger sister, and confiscate whatever medical supplies remain." The officer hesitated, sweat beading on his forehead. "But commander, what if she truly carries the demonic plague?" Jung-woo scoffed, his eyes gleaming with unmatched tactical brilliance. "Use your brain. If she were highly contagious, this fool would have succumbed to it days ago," the lieutenant gasped, realizing the genius of his leader's deduction. "Now stop wasting my time and deploy the unit before I lose my patience," Jung-woo commanded. He then turned to another trembling soldier. "Drag this battered fool to the vanguard dormitories. Shove some decent food down his throat the moment he regains consciousness, and drag his sorry behind to the training grounds at first light." The soldiers exchanged absolutely bewildered glances. "Sir, does this mean we are recruiting this criminal?" a guard stammered. Jung-woo turned his back, his dark cape fluttering in the wind. "From this moment forward, his life belongs to our guild," he declared. That very same desperate man from the past was none other than Woo-sik, the current prestigious president of the Hunter Academy. Snapping back to the present, the mighty president stared at the small boy, his jaw on the floor. "Commander, how in the heavens did you end up like this?" he choked out. Jung-woo shrugged his tiny shoulders, looking completely unbothered. "Who knows? I simply opened my eyes one day, and I was stuck in this fragile vessel." Woo-sik aggressively rubbed his temples, feeling a massive migraine coming on. A reincarnated commander? It shattered everything he knew about the laws of the universe. The main character sighed, recognizing the pure denial in his old comrade's eyes. "Still struggling to grasp reality, I see?" Jung-woo taunted with a smirk. "Can you blame me?" The president fired back, completely flustered. Legendary heroes returning from the dead in children's bodies is not exactly everyday news. A devilish grin spread across the boy's face. "Oh? Should I refresh your memory then?" Jung-woo teased. "Like the time you completely wet your trousers facing your very first goblin horde?" Unable to handle the sheer embarrassment, the dignified president wildly swung a desperate comedic punch to shut the boy up. Meanwhile, outside the grand office doors, Mr. Park was sprinting down the hallway, completely out of breath. Cold sweat drenched his back as he recalled the absolute fury in the president's voice earlier. "Why is this happening to my career?" The poor teacher panicked internally. All because of one troublesome special admission student. These scholarship kids from the slums always brought a storm of trouble with them. But for a mere freshman to casually barge into the academy president's sanctum, it was a monumental breach of hierarchy. Standing before the towering mahogany doors, Mr. Park swallowed his pride. Cursing his wretched luck would not save his job now. His only option was to drop to his knees and beg for mercy from the enraged president. Taking a deep breath, he slowly pushed the heavy doors open. "President Woo-sik, I throw myself at your mercy," he cried out. But before he could fall to his knees, a bizarre sound caught his attention. Peeking inside, his brain completely short-circuited. The almighty president of the Hunter Academy was sweating buckets, doing rapid-fire push-ups on the floor, and standing over him was that very same freshman, barking out military drills like a drill sergeant. "Keep your core tight. Is that all the stamina you have left?" the child commanded ruthlessly. Mr. Park's soul almost left his body at the sheer absurdity of the scene. Without making a single sound, he slowly, very slowly, pulled the door completely shut. An oppressive aura filled the room as our protagonist pressed an ice pack to his face. His former comrade, on the other hand, sweated bullets in his presence. Jung-woo complained about the lingering pain, prompting his old subordinate to frantically apologize for the disgraceful incident. A single cup of coffee rested between them as the reincarnated hero muttered about how unrecognizable the world had become. Woo-shik solemnly agreed, noting how terrifying it must feel to have an entire era shift in the blink of an eye. The protagonist nodded, stating that the most absurd difference was their method of subjugation. He described the absolute madness of soldiers luring a deadly beast right into the heart of the city, just to hunt it. The academy president guessed this happened near the hospital, realizing exactly what was running through his former master's mind. He knew Jung-woo was desperately trying to comprehend how their martial society had fallen into such a pathetic state. Woo-shik explained that ever since his leader vanquished the apocalyptic beast, Gigantia, true peace had descended. He added that high-tier demonic beasts had become a myth, twisting public monster hunts into acceptable forms of entertainment. Blazing with righteous fury, the young hero roared that there was a limit to human arrogance, but the president sighed, revealing a darker truth. He confessed that the hunter industry would collapse without corporate sponsors. Because the awakened associations were deeply entangled in politics, the system had grown corrupt. The masses only cared for flashy spectacles, turning once honorable hunters into nothing more than glorified celebrities. Gritting his teeth with overwhelming frustration, the boy declared they could still fix this broken era. He commanded his old subordinate, who was now the academy president, to immediately start forging the next generation into true warriors. But Woo-shik hung his head in shame. The old man repeated that he had no power to change the educational laws by himself. Jun-woo's eyes narrowed as he asked if his comrade was just a puppet on a string. He demanded to know where their former party members were, suggesting they unite their martial power. But Woo-shik dropped a heavy truth. Their old comrades were the very ones pulling the strings. The president hated to admit it, but he was entirely certain that the others would reject their leader's miraculous resurrection. Massaging his temples to fend off a headache, the protagonist groaned at the absolute mess before him. His loyal subordinate tried to soothe his rising aura, reminding him that they lived in an era of peace. However, the hero shattered that illusion with a single sentence. Gigantia is going to resurrect. The very name made Woo-shik's blood run cold, freezing him in absolute terror. Gasping for breath, he desperately begged his master to tell him it was a lie. Trembling uncontrollably, he asked if it was truly the same apocalyptic calamity they had bled to defeat. Jun-woo grimaced, admitting he had tried to deny it himself, but the nightmare was real. He recounted the moment of his death. As his soul faded, a mysterious entity promised his return in 42 years, alongside the revival of the Supreme Beast. Paralyzed by shock, the president desperately asked if there was some cosmic misunderstanding. He questioned if they should blindly trust this prophecy. Unleashing his dominating aura, Jun-woo snapped that his very existence, reincarnated 42 years after dying, was undeniable proof. He turned his back to leave, muttering that he came seeking a strategic solution. Woo-shik frantically asked what his master intended to do. The young boy's eyes darkened as he realized fate was already in motion. With a terrifying, bloodthirsty glare, he vowed to slaughter the beast himself, just as he did in his past life. But the president cried out, warning that with his current unawakened body, he wouldn't stand a chance against the calamity. The protagonist merely smirked, his absolute confidence unshaken. Suddenly, a tactical thought crossed Jun-woo's mind. He demanded his legendary weapon, knowing his mortal vessel needed heavenly steel. But the president delivered a crushing blow. The divine sword was locked away inside the Supernatural Dimension Management Association, entirely out of his reach. He explained that the man guarding their old treasury was none other than Executive Director Sugu. The hero raised an eyebrow, recalling the youngest, most eager disciple of his vanguard squad. A confident smile graced the hero's lips as he declared this a flawless victory. After all, that boy's loyalty was absolute. But the president shattered his hopes, warning that the man he once knew had changed. In this new era, Sugu would be his most dangerous adversary. Annoyance flared in the young master's eyes as his grand plans crumbled to dust. Seeing his master's rising temper, his subordinate quickly offered a lifeline. Sugu's beloved granddaughter was a student here. He added that the ruthless executive director would grant the girl any wish she desired. Jung-woo's mind raced as he processed this tactical advantage. He realized that claiming the legendary sword meant conquering the granddaughter's favor first. However, the president's voice trembled as he mentioned a fatal catch. The protagonist demanded to know the heir's identity. Woo-shik gulped, revealing that his master had already crossed paths with her. She was the arrogant hunter at the disastrous hospital subjugation. A memory flashed through the hero's mind, and he realized his brilliant plan was already doomed. Wide-eyed, the boy choked out a question. Was that stubborn girl really his former comrade's bloodline? The president nodded grimly, confirming his absolute worst nightmare. The old man declared their mission a failure, remembering how, after that pathetic monster hunt, Jung-woo had ruthlessly crushed the girl's pride with an overwhelming verbal assault. Sweating nervously, Woo-shik asked if blood was drawn. The hero brushed off the concern, claiming he merely imparted some harsh martial wisdom before walking away. But then, the weight of his own actions finally crashed down on him. He clutched his hair and screamed in absolute despair at his ruined fate. Without warning, the reincarnated master gestured fiercely toward the old man. Staring blankly at the commanding hand, Woo-shik was utterly lost in translation. The confused president cautiously asked if Jung-woo required an artifact. With a fiery glint in his eyes, the protagonist demanded an academy registration form. The old man gasped, shocked that the legendary hero was going to enroll. Are we really proceeding with this? The youth orders him to prepare it immediately, just as his loyal subordinate advised. He must infiltrate the academy. Getting close to Saku's granddaughter is the only path to reclaiming his divine artifact. Still reeling from the shock, the guild president questions this absurd plan. Enroll at a hunter academy at his ancient age? Jung-woo scoffs at the hesitation. Woik nervously points out the glaring flaw. The great hero's soul is far too old. He could never blend in with modern teenagers. He warns that one of two things will happen. Either the mortal kids will mock him, or he will utterly slaughter them. Annoyance flashes in the venerable master's eyes. He snaps that he isn't here to play school. The moment his weapon is secured, he will abandon this childish academy. The president sighs at his leader's relentless nature. With a bittersweet smile, he mutters that this exact stubbornness caused his previous downfall. Woik carefully hands over the forged registration papers. The loyal subordinate pleads one last time. Please, do not unleash your bloodlust on the children. Jung-woo scowls, asking if he looks like some street thug. His subordinate begs him to swallow his pride, even if these mortal brats test his patience. He must endure their foolishness. The protagonist's aura flares with absolute irritation. Woik drops his head, practically begging. Do not treat these fragile students like the battle-hardened warriors of your old squad. The very next morning, the infiltration begins. He steps onto the grounds of the prestigious Hunter Academy, assigned to the lowest rank, Class 1E. The ancient warrior feels a strange wave of nerves, a completely unfamiliar battlefield. Regardless, his objective remains crystal clear. He must suppress his supreme aura until he can corner the director's granddaughter. Suddenly, a sharp voice shatters his thoughts, demanding to know why he is blocking the path. A fierce-looking girl glares at him, ordering him to move aside if he isn't entering. Caught off guard by this mortal's audacity, he awkwardly mutters that he was just going in. But the girl steps aggressively closer, her eyes narrowing as she scans his face. Wait, are you the crazy dog from yesterday? The ancient master blinks in pure confusion. Dog? What kind of disrespectful title is this? She scoffs, mentioning the rumors of a special transfer. The entire school was buzzing with anticipation, but she never expected the highly anticipated student to be the wild dog from the public hunt. She mutters that this is completely unbelievable. Jung-woo furrows his brow, demanding an explanation. What exactly does she mean by dog? The reincarnated hero is utterly baffled by modern slang. Still failing to grasp the insult, he steps inside, muttering under his breath that the youths of this era are truly incomprehensible. As he crosses the threshold of the classroom, a heavy silence instantly suffocates the room. Every single student freezes in place. Their jaws drop as they stare at the newcomer. Whispers erupt like wildfire across the desks. Is that really the mad dog from yesterday? Others point trembling fingers in his direction, confirming he is indeed the legendary lunatic. from the recent chaotic incident. The air buzzes with disbelief and shock. The reincarnated master feels a headache forming. It is barely the first minute of his first day. Yet he is already the center of attention. He suppresses a sigh and chooses to ignore the stares. In his past life as a supreme being, he had imagined this academy as a disciplined training ground, not a chaotic den of gossiping mortals. He scans the room for an empty desk. But his gaze locks onto something entirely out of place. Resting perfectly on a corner table is a massive, flamboyant bouquet of flowers. His eye twitches in absolute disbelief. That foolish guild president has gone way too far, slamming himself into the chair. He grumbles about the pathetic waste of funds, such useless resources that cannot even be consumed. But before he can toss the ridiculous gift away, a violent shout echoes through the hallway. A delinquent student is screaming at the top of his lungs, spewing curses and disrespecting a senior instructor, arrogantly declaring that he is not the problem. The classroom door is kicked open with a loud bang. The troublemaker struts in, complaining loudly, whining about how utterly annoying morning classes are. A tense silence falls over the room. Not a single student dares to make a sound. Observing this pathetic display of arrogance, the reincarnated hero scoffs internally. Every generation has these delusional fools, weaklings who believe they rule the small pond they swim in. Suddenly, the delinquent's gaze snaps toward Jung-woo. A wicked, malicious grin spreads across his face. Smelling fresh prey, he confidently swaggers over. The tension in the room skyrockets. Well, what do we have here? Leaning dangerously close to the ancient master, the brat mocks him with a sneer. Are you that famous mad dog from yesterday? The bully announces it loudly for the whole class to hear, claiming this is the suicidal fool who messed with Yi-Rei, causing a massive scene during the public monster hunt. And now, he is supposedly their special transfer student. Slightly taken aback, Jung-woo furrows his brow. How on earth did this mortal learn about that incident? The delinquent bursts into hysterical laughter. Mocking the protagonist's sheer ignorance, he reveals that the video went completely viral. It was plastered all over every social media platform. The ancient soul, trapped in a young body, blinks. Social media? What kind of information network is that? Smacking his own forehead at the boomer-like confusion. The brat cannot believe this guy is for real. With a cruel smirk, he continues his taunting, pointing out the absolute insanity of picking a fight with Yi-Rei, only to end up transferring into her exact same class. He calls Jung-woo a complete, utterly fearless lunatic. But then, the bully does something unexpected. He extends a hand, flashing a fake, venomous smile. Claiming it is an absolute pleasure to meet a fellow madman, he arrogantly asks if the protagonist recognizes him, boasting that his name is Ju-uk. Murderous intent spikes within the ancient master. But Woik's desperate pleading echoes in his mind. Tolerate the annoying children. Do not kill the classmates. Forcing his killing intent down, the legendary hero grips the insolent boy's hand. He calmly states his own name in return. Hearing it, Ju-uk bursts into obnoxious laughter, mocking the sheer audacity of his parents. Did they really think giving him the name of a legendary hero would magically turn him into a top-tier hunter? The ancient hero forces a polite, empty smile. While internally, an inferno of pure wrath is boiling. His fingers itch with the desire to crush this mortal. Unaware of his impending doom, Ju-uk changes the subject. Leaning in, he asks about the director's granddaughter. What is the famous untouchable girl actually like up close? The trashy bully licks his lips, commenting that her physical proportions are top tier, and her face is definitely cute enough to pass. Chuckling darkly, he shrugs his shoulders, admitting he has no idea where her powerful grandfather is, since the director is always missing in action, but claims her missing guardian is why she acts so arrogantly. The delinquent puffs out his chest, completely full of himself, boasting loudly to the entire silent room that if it were not for her terrible fiery temper, she would be the absolute perfect plaything for him. But suddenly, a freezing aura cuts through the room. A sharp, commanding voice shatters his arrogant monologue, telling the pathetic boy to keep his delusional fantasies in check. Annoyed, Ju-uk turns around, snapping at the intruder. The protagonist's eyes widen slightly in recognition. Standing right there is the very target he was looking for. The fierce girl from the doorway has entered the fray. She glares at Ju-uk with absolute disgust, telling him to buy a mirror before evaluating anyone else's looks. Humiliated in front of everyone, Ju-uk's face twists in rage. He snarls, demanding to know if this crazy chick wants to die. threatening that he let her attitude slide before, but now she has officially crossed a fatal line. Unfazed, the girl stands her ground, her aura flaring. There is absolutely no difference between them now, considering they have both been dumped into the exact same class. The arrogant young master explodes in a fit of rage, screaming that he rightfully belongs in the elite class B, but the girl does not back down. She coldly reminds him that his own sheer incompetence dragged him down to class E, pushing the spoiled brat past his breaking point. She ruthlessly adds that without his powerful father pulling strings from the shadows, he would have been expelled ages ago. Blinded by fury, the noble yells that she has finally crossed the line. He raises his hand, aura gathering in his palm for a vicious slap. The girl tightly shuts her eyes, bracing for the inevitable impact. But suddenly, the air shifts. The arrogant brat is violently sent flying across the room like a broken rag doll. The entire classroom gasps in absolute shock, their minds completely blank as they try to process the scene. Our protagonist, Jung-woo, had casually delivered a devastating kick. Sprawled on the floor, the noble looks at Jung-woo as if staring at a madman. But Jung-woo simply glares down, with an utterly chilling, indifferent gaze. The brat screams at the transfer student, demanding to know if a worthless commoner really just kicked him. Unfazed, Jung-woo meets his furious stare, and dangerously asks if the young master wants to experience it a second time. Struggling to his feet, the humiliated noble sneers, asking if the new kid is having trouble grasping the academy hierarchy. On his very first day, overflowing with killing intent, he declares that he will have to beat this arrogant transfer student until his commoner brain finally remembers its place. Instead of cowering, our protagonist bursts into uncontrollable laughter. He mocks the spoiled noble, calling him nothing but a neighborhood street thug, and drops a chilling question, asking if he has ever been standing at the very edge of death to be spouting such nonsense. Channeling his energy for a devastating punch, the brat growls that he has no idea what this insane transfer student is babbling about. With a fluid motion, Jung-woo effortlessly dodges the heavy strike. He mockingly critiques the pathetic form, noting that putting all his strength into that punch left his entire right side completely defenseless. Just as the counterattack is about to land, the instructor slams the classroom door open, demanding to know what is causing this chaos. Still, boiling with rage, the young master curses his luck that the teacher had to interfere at that exact moment. As he storms out, the brat sneers, promising that he will see our protagonist very soon. He swears on his pride that he will make Jung-woo's academy life a living hell from this day forward. Meanwhile, inside the high-ranking executive office, the academy president is gripping his hair in absolute sheer stress. His assistant sighs heavily, asking how their promising new student could cause such a massive incident on the very first day. Groaning in frustration, the president admits he is trying his hardest to keep things under control. He confirms that he somehow managed to silence the academy disciplinary committee for now. But dealing with the boy's family is a completely different nightmare. The assistant nervously points out the terrifying truth. That brat's father is none other than the ex-astarted Minister of the National Subjugation Department. He explains that as the youngest son of such a monstrous figure, the boy can cause all the destructive chaos he wants, and the media will never whisper a single word about it, all thanks to his father's crushing authority. Jung-woo finally pieces together why that arrogant noble acts like a god among men. The president rubs his temples, warning Jung-woo that he has made an enemy out of a true monster. He gravely states that if the protagonist ever crosses paths with that young master again, the academy will not be able to protect him. Stepping out of the suffocating office, Jung-woo takes a long, deep breath. But out of nowhere, the girl from the classroom is leaning against the wall, waiting for him. She immediately demands to know why he intervened, questioning if he is completely oblivious to what kind of monster that young master truly is. The protagonist simply shrugs, stating that he has always despised arrogant scum like him. Narrowing his eyes, Jung-woo asks why she was provoking a fight with that dangerous noble, especially when he was not even insulting her directly. But as he takes a closer look, a sudden realization hits him like a lightning bolt. Staring at her striking facial features, our protagonist realizes this girl bears an uncanny resemblance to a legendary hunter he knows. Her name is Go-eun. Eyes wide with realization, he asks if she is secretly Una's sister. The girl stoically confirms the truth. A spark of hope ignites within his chest, realizing this could be his golden ticket to getting closer to his target. But she instantly shatters his grand illusions. Her voice turns ice cold as she explains that they share different bloodlines. She was completely erased from the noble family registry, basically making them complete strangers. Desperately trying to salvage his plan, he asks if she still holds any connection to the clan patriarch. Her eyes narrow with deep-seated resentment as she bites back that she has a fantastic relationship with him, considering that old monster is the exact person who heartlessly banished her from the bloodline. At that moment, Jung-woo's mind goes completely blank. Realizing he has just stepped on a massive landmine, she scoffs, asking if he only played the hero hoping to secure a powerful, noble connection. With a bitter smile, the girl admits she does not even blame him. In this cutthroat academy, a commoner special admission student is practically walking prey, desperate to cling to anyone with power. She softly sighs, confessing she foolishly thought he possessed true honor. But in the end, he is just another social climber blinded by status. Hearing this, Jung-woo's expression hardens. He calmly fires back that she is exactly the same as the nobles she despises. After all, she instantly judged his entire character simply because he bears the title of a special admission student. Turning his back on her, the protagonist begins to walk away, throwing a cold remark that all this obsessive talk about noble status, ancient families, and academy rankings is utterly pathetic. Stung by his words, she yells after him, warning that he will very soon discover the brutal, blood-stained reality of being a commoner. Without looking back, he simply smirks and asks if that is a promise. The girl is left standing alone in the grand hallway, watching his retreating figure. A storm of complex emotions swirling in her eyes, she remains, locked in absolute silence. Later that day, under the deceptive calm of the academy courtyard, Jung-woo sighs, realizing his original infiltration plan has been completely burned to ashes. Now, he will have to forge a new path to reach Yuna. But suddenly, an ominous shadow falls over him from behind. A mountain of a student cracks his knuckles, growling, asking if he is the cocky new trash from Class E. Not in the mood for games, Jung-woo coldly demands to know what the giant wants. Right on cue, two more menacing lackeys step out from the other side of the corridor, blocking his only escape route. As expected in this ruthless academy, our protagonist has just been completely surrounded. The towering brute commands Jung-woo to follow them quietly, unless he wants his bones broken and his pride shattered right out in the open. Our protagonist simply lets out an exasperated sigh, violently scratching his head as his irritation peaks. The goons force him toward an isolated, abandoned storage room deep within the academy. Stepping past the threshold, the darkness instantly swallows them whole. He stops in his tracks, feeling the malicious aura thickening in the air. But instead of fear, a predatory smirk crosses Jung-woo's face. In every era, there is always that one arrogant fool. From the shadows of the academy alleyway, the wannabe young master, Jusok, steps forward. With a wicked sneer, he announces that before they create some unforgettable school memories together, he has a little question. He arrogantly demands to know how a lowly student like Jung-woo dares to provoke a noble existence like himself. Already losing his patience, the main character lets out a heavy sigh. He wonders aloud why every single trash-tier extra in this academy is so obsessed with his special admission status. Mockingly, the spoiled brat spits back that status is everything in this world. His face twisting with rage, he declares that a charity case, surviving on pity and support funds, has no right to breathe the same air as him. Jusok smirks, claiming his own immense power is currently restricted, so he will generously let his lackeys handle the beating. Suddenly, a treacherous ambush. One of the grunts launches a cowardly kick from behind, but to an existence like the main character, this is nothing but child's play. He casually sways his body, letting the attacker crash face first into the dirt as a mocking smile crosses his lips. The pathetic gang leader scoffs, praising his dodging skills as if it were a joke. They shower Jung-woo with vicious insults, labeling him a worthless special admission rat. Blinded by their own arrogance, another lackey throws a heavy punch. Jung-woo flawlessly evades the strike, lamenting how the modern martial world has fallen so low. They do not even teach the most basic combat arts anymore. Out of nowhere, a massive brute charges forward like a wild boar, screaming insults and calling him a filthy rodent. Bam! Jung-woo drives a devastating knee straight into the giant's face. The mountain of a boy instantly crumbles to the earth, completely knocked out. The brute's pride, along with his nose, is utterly shattered, as fresh crimson pools on the ground. Seeing their strongest fighter obliterated in a single breath, the remaining delinquents freeze in absolute horror. Their arrogance melts into pure terror. With a cold, piercing gaze, the main character calmly asks, if there is still a problem here. Weren't they just boasting about tearing him apart? Jung-woo steps forward, the very air around him growing heavy. He asks Jusok if he still wants to create those unforgettable academy memories. With eyes as dark as the abyss, he warns them that if they want to play with fire, they had better be prepared to burn to ashes. Meanwhile, across the sprawling academy campus, Ah-rim is forcefully marching down the grand hallways. She mutters bitter curses under her breath, walking faster and faster. The main character's cold words echo endlessly in her mind. Her blood boils at the memory. How dare he judge her without knowing the weight of her reality? Suddenly, a frantic student bursts into the corridor, shouting breaking news. The special admission student has been cornered by Jusok's vicious gang. The hallway erupts into whispers. The bystanders shake their heads in pity, murmuring that it is already too late. This will surely set a new academy record for the fastest expulsion. A few cowardly students whisper about calling the instructors, but the fear of crossing a noble family keeps their mouths shut. No one dares to intervene. Ah-rim scoffs, coldly turning her back. She tells herself that an arrogant fool like him naturally attracts disaster with his reckless pride. But then, his haunting voice echoes in her soul once more. You are just like the rest of them, blindly judging what you cannot comprehend. Her heart skips a violent beat. She freezes mid-step. Clenching her fists, Ah-rim suddenly spins around and sprints desperately through the academy halls, rushing straight toward the danger. Back in the shadowy courtyard, the main character stands like an unmoving mountain against the remaining 3 attackers. Jusok screams frantically at his pathetic subordinates, ordering them to crush the boy to dust. But the lackeys tremble, their combat spirit utterly broken by Jung-woo's overwhelming aura. Sighing in deep disappointment, Jung-woo asks why they are throwing such a massive tantrum over a simple bloody nose. He coldly states that their physical and mental cultivation is no better than that of a crying toddler. This absolute humiliation pushes the wannabe delinquent over the edge. Veins bulging in his forehead, the rich brat orders his lackey to awaken their innate abilities. The goons pale in terror, stammering that illegal ability usage will guarantee their expulsion. But the maddened Jusok snarls back, claiming they just need to leave no witnesses behind. Sweating profusely, the desperate grunts begin channeling their magical energy. The main character's sharp eyes narrow. He notices they are all wearing identical enforcement bracelets, exactly like the ones used to seal combat powers. So this is how they bypass the Academy's strict weapon laws. The attackers stare at the main character, waiting for him to tremble in fear. Suddenly, another lackey collapses under the sheer pressure of the situation. Disgusted by his own men, Jusok curses them as useless trash. With a twisted grin, he activates his bracelet to forcefully tap into the awakening system. His panicked friends beg him to stop, warning of catastrophic consequences. But the arrogant young master orders them to shut their mouths. He unleashes his Rank D system authority, forcefully drawing out his combat prowess. The main character simply stands there, watching this pathetic display with absolute boredom. Flash! The rich brat summons a menacing black trident into his hands. Drunk on his newly manifested power, he vows to make Jung-woo scream and beg for his worthless life. Unfazed, the main character tilts his head and asks if this foolish delinquent even knows the martial way of the spear. Bursting into maniacal laughter, the boy calls Jung-woo a blind idiot, boasting that just holding a heavenly weapon makes him invincible. Slowly, the main character reaches down and picks up a simple wooden broom. He asks if this ignorant child truly believes that merely summoning a weapon grants true strength. He realizes these sheltered academy kids know absolutely nothing about the merciless reality of cultivation. With terrifying precision, Jung-woo points the mundane broomstick at the arrogant brat like a lethal blade. Boiling with explosive fury, the so-called leader screams, demanding to know how a filthy rat dares to raise a weapon against him outside a dungeon. Meanwhile, deep inside the prestigious faculty office, the elite instructors are already discussing the chaos. The special admission student has sparked a massive incident on day 1. A male professor chuckles, admitting the boy is either insanely brave or incredibly foolish for challenging Jusok from the elite Class B. He smugly assumes that this reckless behavior proves the boy possesses zero talent as a hunter. But the senior female instructor sharply shuts him down. "You are completely wrong," she states coldly. The male teacher blinks in confusion, demanding to know what she means. Adjusting her glasses, she drops a terrifying revelation. Student Jung-woo was completely excluded from the standard aptitude evaluation. She explains that this unprecedented exception is a privilege granted only to those rare monsters whose combat classification is so overwhelmingly godly, it simply cannot be measured by human systems. So far, he is the only one. The only other student flagged with the excluded status was Yoon, but clearly, this transfer student stands completely on her level. The faculty couldn't fathom why he wasn't immediately placed in Class A. However, the instructor revealed a shocking truth. This placement was a direct order from the chairman himself. Why would someone so incredibly powerful choose to mask his true strength? In a world where cultivation is everything, it made zero sense. Suddenly, a frantic voice echoes down the academy hallway. It was Ahin, gasping for breath and drenched in a cold sweat. She desperately explains the crisis currently unfolding. Meanwhile, inside the dusty confines of the storage room, the protagonist was casually parrying lethal martial strikes, using nothing but a fragile wooden broomstick he found on the floor, pushed to the absolute brink of humiliation. The arrogant senior unleashes a furious, desperate barrage, yet Jung-woo deflects every single blow with terrifying ease. The brat's mind spirals into utter, disbelieving chaos. This is impossible. Just activating my aura should have crushed him. Watching a mere transfer student effortlessly counter his heavenly arts with a pathetic cleaning tool drives him to madness. Spitting curses, the bully demands to know what kind of trickery this is. Once again, his ultimate strike is swatted away like a pesky fly. Blind with rage, the senior continues his relentless, pathetic assault. Jung-woo's eyes turn dead and infinitely cold. He warns the fool that true combat arts aren't meant for childish tantrums. Stepping back to create distance, the wannabe thug sneers with supreme arrogance. What could trash like you possibly understand about my divine abilities? Effortlessly weaving through the deadly arcs of energy, Jung-woo calmly analyzes the weapon's true origin. This artifact was forged from a demonic beast of the Shadow Realm. A dark, mocking smirk creeps across the protagonist's face. Do you even realize what kind of ancient, terrifying power you are swinging around? Like a glorified fly swatter? This relic was a silver spoon gift from the bully's father back in his childhood, a wealthy shortcut that bought him a VIP seat in Class B. It practically guaranteed his future as an elite awakened hunter, securing him a high-ranking field agent position within the Heavenly Guild. The harsh truth hits a nerve, sending the brat into a frenzied, blinding rage. In a blur of motion, Jung-woo completely disarms him. Suddenly, a blue system window materializes in the air. System alert. Weapon disconnected from host. Immediate retrieval required. But it was already far too late. Jung-woo stood tall, gripping the mythical trident in his own hands. His gaze darkens into a chilling, apex predator stare. Open your eyes and watch closely, he commands with overwhelming spiritual pressure. This is how a true master commands the shadows. A blinding surge of dark energy shatters the atmosphere. In a fraction of a heartbeat, every single trace of light is swallowed by an abyssal void. The surrounding students freeze in pure, unadulterated terror. The sunlit afternoon has been instantly devoured by pitch-black night. A momentary sigh of relief escapes them as the gloom slowly shifts. But true despair is only just beginning. "Look down," someone stammers, pointing trembling fingers at the floor. Absolute panic erupts as they witness an impossible phenomenon. Their own shadows are rebelling against the laws of nature. The darkness completely severs itself from their physical bodies. The natural order of the world has been utterly shattered. The heavy-set lackey stares at his empty hands in absolute horror. Not a single drop of shadow remains in the entire room. The darkness is rapidly flowing toward a single, terrifying focal point. Like a cosmic black hole, the protagonist is devouring the surrounding shadows. Demonic energy coils around his figure like cursed, living armor. The arrogant senior falls to his knees, his mind completely breaking. His human brain refuses to process the cosmic horror unfolding before him. Staring up at Jung-woo's godlike demonic manifestation, the bully's entire reality crumbles into useless dust. Is that really my weapon? He whimpers in breathless disbelief. Suffocating under the immense killing intent, the brat hyperventilates. Utterly broken by primal fear, a warm puddle forms beneath him. Jung-woo casually rests the cursed blade against the trembling boy's throat. Pathetic pleas for mercy echo endlessly through the dark room, but the protagonist's eyes remain as cold as the grave. He raises the weapon. The executioner's strike begins its fatal, glowing descent. The trident hums with bloodthirsty, ancient spiritual energy. The fake tyrant breaks down, sobbing uncontrollably like an infant. Ding! The system chimes with absolute, perfect timing. 1 minute duration expired. forcing weapon seal. The shadowy artifact suddenly vaporizes into thin air, leaving Jianwu empty-handed, looking down at the pathetic, broken senior. Now twitching on the floor and foaming at the mouth from sheer, unadulterated terror, Jianwu sighs coldly. I suppose that is enough of a lesson. He lazily kicks the unconscious bully's leg. Hey! Wake up, trash, he mutters in a deeply annoyed tone. The legendary aura vanishes from the room without a single trace. I didn't even touch you. The protagonist scoffs at the trembling mess. He orders the quivering boy to pull himself together and stand up, paralyzed by lingering dread. The bully frantically obeys the command. Like a broken puppet on strings, he scrambles to his feet. Jianwu locks eyes with him, releasing a tiny fraction of his monstrous killing intent. Are you listening to me? He whispers dangerously. He reminds the trembling thug of the awakened hunter's absolute law. Skills and artifacts are strictly forbidden outside the dungeons, especially when aimed at fragile, ordinary humans. Understand? The terrifying pressure forces a frantic, tearful nod. The former Shadow Monarch leans in close, delivering his final verdict. If I ever catch you playing with power like that again, I will personally shatter every bone in your legs. Pivoting his icy gaze to the paralyzed gang members, Jianwu snaps an order that instantly freezes their blood. Don't move a single muscle. He points directly at the heavy-set lackey. You, punch me right in the jaw. The command drops like a bomb in the deafeningly silent room. Swing with absolutely everything you have, the protagonist demands. After all, your gang's reputation would be ruined if people knew you failed. Jianwu smirks slightly, masterminding the perfect cover story. I have zero desire to stand out or attract the Academy's attention, so let us wrap up this little charade immediately. Trembling like a leaf in a storm, the lackey violently hesitates. Are you absolutely sure? He stammers, terrified of striking the monster before him. Do it now, or you won't live to see tomorrow. Fueled by pure survival instinct, the lackey swings with maximum force. The heavy fist connects with a sickening, wet thud. At that exact, calculated second, the instructors burst through the storage room doors. The head teacher freezes, utterly horrified by the brutal scene. Seeing fresh blood splattered across the dusty floor, she unleashes her absolute fury. He just transferred today. Are you out of your minds? Desperate to explain, the fat thug stutters nervously. But miss, I swear the blood on the floor is actually mine. Ignoring the pathetic excuse, another instructor barks a harsh, unyielding command. All of you delinquents, to the disciplinary office. Right now. The worried teacher turns to Ahin, instructing her to rush the poor victim to the medical bay. As the protagonist stumbles past the bewildered girl, he mutters softly, Damn, this mortal vessel is far weaker than I calculated. He clicks his tongue in annoyance at his own pathetic physical limitations. Well? Are you going to just stand there? He asks the frozen girl. You are supposed to be stopping the bleeding and guiding me to the healer, remember? Ahin remains completely speechless, staring at him in utter, mind-bending bewilderment. Her mind cannot reconcile the bloody victim with the monstrous aura from before. Sighing heavily, Jianwu shakes his head. Whatever. Forget I asked. He assured her he would handle the matter personally, but she was not letting it go that easily. She demanded to know his true identity. Juok scoffed, dismissing him as nothing more than a mere special admission student, a nobody who merely paid the ultimate price for daring to step out of line. But Ain's eyes narrowed dangerously. She revealed that she had witnessed the entire hidden encounter. Her mind flashed back to earlier. Following the teacher's strict orders to patrol the academy grounds, her sharp ears caught muffled sounds echoing from the shadows of the abandoned warehouse. Creeping toward the dusty window, she peered inside and froze in absolute disbelief. There was the supposedly weak protagonist, coldly reprimanding the arrogant Wok. After finally tracking him down, she demanded to know why someone with his terrifying hidden strength was not placed in the elite Class A. Clearly annoyed, the protagonist told her to mind her own business. He made it absolutely clear that his sole objective was to remain entirely invisible, to pass through this academy like a ghost, and leave without leaving a single trace behind. His voice dropped dangerously, warning her to completely erase everything she had just witnessed. Ain swallowed hard, admitting his logic was flawless. Satisfied, the boy calmly asked her to lead the way back to the medical wing, but she stubbornly refused to back down, desperately insisting that they were cut from the exact same cloth. With a heavy sigh, she confessed the ugly truth. She had looked down on him from the start. She had treated him like utter trash, simply because he carried the humiliating title of a special admission student. Bowing her head, she offered a deep and sincere apology for the harsh venom she had spat at him. The protagonist coolly accepted her regrets, asking one last time for directions to the infirmary. But instead of moving, she practically begged for his divine assistance. Her voice trembled with sheer desperation. She explained that securing a seat on the student council was not just a goal, but a desperate matter of survival. Taking a deep breath, she unveiled the Academy's unforgiving rules. To even step foot into the sacred council, a candidate desperately needed a powerful guarantor. This was an absolute necessity for someone like her, a student cursed with 0 achievements to her name. The protagonist's eyes gleamed with sudden understanding. He sharply questioned if rivals typically hunted down these guarantors to brutally crush the competition before it even began. The girl nodded with a grim expression. That exact ruthless tactic was why she was completely cornered. No one dared to become her shield. That was why she was desperately pleading with him to be her backer. But Jung-woo shot her down without a second of hesitation. He was already drowning in his own complicated schemes. Desperate, An swore she would offer him anything he desired. But the young cultivator remained entirely unmoved, stating coldly that her empty promises meant nothing. She lacked the true power to offer him anything of value. Turning his back, he announced his departure to the infirmary. Panicking, the girl threw out her absolute final lifeline. Did he not want to master the hidden secrets of the Academy? The hidden flow of money, the underground rules, or perhaps a direct introduction to Un? The protagonist paused, casting a highly skeptical glance over his shoulder. Could a disgraced student truly deliver on such bold claims? Especially someone who had faced the crushing shame of expulsion? Her face flushed deep crimson. Stammering, she awkwardly tried to explain that the rumors were entirely twisted. The heavy weight of embarrassment was practically suffocating her on the spot. Ain finally confessed her ultimate trump card. Her own sister was a seated noble of the student council. If she could just secure a position of power herself, that golden introduction would naturally fall right into his lap. The tiny flicker of interest in his eyes instantly died. Sighing heavily, he decided he would forge his own lonely path. But without warning, a violent wave of dizziness struck his core. Pure panic washed over the girl as she sprinted toward him, just as his vision faded to black, and he collapsed heavily onto the cold floor. Meanwhile, deep within the Academy's grand halls, the high-ranking faculty had gathered for an extremely tense emergency summit. The atmosphere inside the room was thick with killing intent. Joke had recklessly unleashed his martial abilities far too many times. An outraged instructor, who had personally witnessed the brutal destruction, slammed his fist onto the table. They could no longer let him walk away with mere slaps on the wrist. An ancient, battle-scarred elder turned to the Academy's president, seeking his ultimate judgment on this catastrophic mess. The president's heavy gaze shifted directly to Professor Yubin. Wishik interrogated her with a piercing, intimidating intensity. Did Juok and his pathetic lackeys truly dare to gang up on the young Jung-woo? She nodded firmly, her voice steady against the pressure. She had seen the vicious ambush with her own 2 eyes. The man pressed harder, asking if the protagonist had truly been beaten down to the dirt. The teacher hesitated, biting her lip before finally confirming the ugly and humiliating rumor. Suddenly, the old man burst into a chilling, mocking laughter. He sarcastically thanked her for the entertaining little story. Straightening his posture, the president's aura flared as he spoke with absolute authority. This blatant disregard for the sacred rules had become a dangerous pattern. The time for foolish leniency was officially over. Juok's fate was sealed, demanding absolute expulsion. But just as the heavy gavel was about to fall, a lone hand shot up into the tense air. A shadowy figure politely requested the floor to intervene. The dissenting teacher fiercely argued that completely ruining a cultivator's future over a minor scuffle was utterly absurd. Such a draconian punishment would be a total waste of monstrous talent. Wishik narrowed his eyes, demanding a proper justification for this nonsense. Juman smoothly countered, leaning back with a sly, knowing grin. He argued that bloody brawls were perfectly normal back in their own golden era of cultivation. He brushed the crime off, claiming the young master was merely bursting with youthful battle energy. Professor Yubin furiously shot back. A reckless outburst of aura like that could trigger a catastrophic disaster. Innocent lives could have been easily lost. But the sly man simply waved off her pathetic concerns. Juok was the shining, absolute future of this grand academy. It would be an unforgivable sin for any mere instructor to clip the wings of a dragon over a single mistake. Destroying his entire heaven-defying destiny over one tiny misstep was pure madness. Playing the grand peacemaker, he offered a highly cunning compromise. He admitted that the arrogant boy had technically broken the iron law. by igniting his deadly martial aura within the sacred academy grounds. With a fake sigh of deep regret, he proposed a perfectly crafted slap on the wrist. A mere 1 week, suspension for the young master to calmly meditate on his sins. The president's brow furrowed in deep, heavy thought. He declared he would weigh both sides and deliver his supreme verdict later. With a grand sweep of his robes, he rose from his seat and officially brought the fiery summit to a close. As the heavy mahogany doors opened and the instructors filed out, Jung-woo remained seated alone in the quiet shadows. A wicked, highly triumphant smirk stretched across his face. He smoothly pulled out his communication device, dialing a highly secured frequency. On the other end, waiting in the absolute shadows of power, the minister anxiously awaited the final verdict. The corrupt teacher delivered the golden, victorious news. The looming crisis had been flawlessly averted. The precious young master would only face a meaningless, temporary suspension. Furthermore, he made absolutely sure to highlight that the brutal end-of-month evaluation was rapidly approaching. They had successfully shielded their greatest pawn for the upcoming trials. Meanwhile, the protagonist clicked his tongue in pure, unadulterated annoyance. 3 whole days had passed, and Un was still a total ghost. He coldly observed his immediate surroundings. His current class was absolutely infested with talentless garbage. Pathetic weaklings who could not even grasp the basics of monstrous beast hunting. It was a total, unforgivable waste of his precious time. In his mind, he coldly calculated the risks. Standing out in this dump of an academy was practically begging for unnecessary trouble. It was infinitely better to remain a hidden shadow. Smack. A heavy hand viciously slapped the back of his head. The academy's low-level trash had returned to test his divine patience. They sneered, asking if the pathetic errand boy had forgotten to warm up their premium meals during the short break. Did this useless peasant want his noble masters to starve to death? Another lackey cracked his knuckles with a cruel, ugly grin, eager to teach this weakling a painful lesson in the natural hierarchy. They needed to violently beat some basic common sense into his skull. Beneath his calm mask, the protagonist's inner aura boiled with deadly, world-ending fury. How in the heavens did a supreme existence like him become a pathetic delivery boy? The overweight bully snorted with absolute, mocking disgust, ridiculing his complete and utter lack of dignity. He barked an arrogant order, commanding the weakling to follow them outside. The 3 foolish brats swaggered out of the classroom like untouchable kings. Moments later, deep in the deserted hallways, the protagonist shadowed the brats, his presence completely and terrifyingly transforming. Suddenly, an oppressive, suffocating aura flooded the entire corridor. He spoke, and his cold, demonic voice made their blood instantly freeze. Jung-woo casually rubbed his head, whispering that the pathetic strike had actually hurt. Instantly, an unseen godlike force slammed the bullies to their knees, forcing them to grovel in absolute terror. Looking down like a supreme deity, he darkly asked if these little insects were letting their pathetic tempers dictate their lifespans. Trembling in fear, the lackeys desperately shake their heads. The protagonist cuts right to the chase, demanding the intel he asked for. Stuttering under his crushing aura, one kid blurts out that a mere freshman could never approach the elite student council. His gaze turns icy. Did they really dare to return empty-handed? The plump lackey quickly stammers that their target, Una, is a ghost on campus. Is that useless crumb of info all they have? Desperate to save his own skin, the lackey reveals her only known connection. She has just one friend in the entire academy, a fellow council member named Jung-woo. Jung-woo realizes this is his only solid lead. Sweating profusely, the lackey admits that Jung-woo is just as elusive, rarely showing his face in the mortal realm of regular classes. Sighing at their incompetence, he shoos the useless brats away. He runs a hand through his hair, frustrated by the dead end. As he contemplates his next move in the hallway, Ah-in suddenly steps out of the shadows. She smoothly remarks that she warned him of this exact outcome. She reminds him of the academy's harsh hierarchy. The student council reigns supreme, untouchable by ordinary mortals like them. The protagonist scoffs, pointing out they are just high schoolers, not royalty. But the girl sternly shakes her head, emphasizing the gravity of the situation. Those council members are born from golden bloodlines. They possess overwhelming wealth and awaken with absolute top-tier hunting skills. They aren't just playing school. They are fully fledged hunters, shedding blood on real, life-or-death subjugation missions. Backed by the immense power of their noble families, even the academy instructors bow to their whims. Their authority is absolute. Ah-in stares right into his eyes, declaring that they live in a completely different world. Unfazed, the protagonist asks for an alternative route. Her eyes light up with burning ambition. She offers a simple deal, make her a council member. But he instantly shuts her down. And demands to know why he is being so stubborn, especially when it costs him nothing. But he reminds her of her own warning. If he interferes, the elites will undoubtedly put a target on his back. Furthermore, she completely lacks the royal bloodline, and she definitely lacks the divine skills required. Desperate, she begs him to become her master, promising to absorb his teachings like a sponge. But the protagonist breaks into a chilling chuckle. His eyes darken with a murderous aura. If she follows his demonic path of cultivation, her fragile body will inevitably turn to dust. A heavy silence falls between them. He questions her dangerous obsession with the council. He warns her not to grasp at heavens beyond her reach. But her spirit remains completely unbroken. She boldly declares that the risks mean nothing to her. If she cannot ascend to the student council, she would rather perish trying. With a fiery, unyielding gaze, she begs for his guidance once more. She is willing to endure any hellish training, ancient martial arts, lethal skills, absolutely anything. Jung-woo coldly notes that the break is over. Turning his back, he prepares to leave for class. Panic setting in, she demands his final answer about being her backer. A subtle smirk forms on his lips. He is genuinely amused by her fearless spirit. He hasn't seen such burning resolve in centuries. Perhaps this mortal girl truly has potential. Moments later, inside Class 1E, the instructor praises her students for their hard work. The atmosphere shifts as she reminds the class about the upcoming monthly evaluation. The dreaded academic trial is fast approaching. She warns them not to drop their guard. Their spiritual energy and test scores were pathetic last month, and they desperately need to cultivate their strength. Just as she outlines the core subjects, a sinister presence breaches the classroom. Professor Jung-man abruptly barges in, cutting her off. His face holds a menacing grin as he announces a massive overhaul to the Academy's grading system. The rules of survival have just changed. He demands absolute silence. From this day forward, the first-year exams will take place inside a real, blood-soaked dungeon. This brutal practical exam sends shivers down the students' spines. The homeroom teacher's eyes widen with sheer outrage at this suicidal mandate. Jung-man coldly orders her to keep her mouth shut. But she refuses to back down, furious that her inexperienced students are being sent to slaughter. The wicked professor scoffs at her concern. Is she saying these future hunters are too weak? He claims that holding them back would be an insult. It would be pure discrimination against their potential. He mocks the terrified room, asking what they thought a Hunter Academy actually was. To graduate as true elites, they must prove their worth in the jaws of death. Meanwhile, the protagonist sharply analyzes the situation. These pampered kids haven't even mastered basic mana control, let alone the art of actual combat. This is a calculated death sentence. Staring daggers at the smirking professor, Jung-woo realizes someone is pulling the strings from the shadows. Jung-man then offers a cowardly way out. The weak-willed can surrender and take remedial theory classes without facing expulsion. But then, his sinister gaze lands directly on Jung-woo. The sole special admission student has absolutely no right to refuse. Stepping back from the exam means instant expulsion for him. Turning on his heel, the corrupt professor announces he will oversee this deadly trial himself. Anyone with complaints can bring them to his office. The protagonist's mind races. A mere academy lapdog doesn't have the authority to alter the curriculum. A much bigger fish is orchestrating this trap. Far above, in the academy president's grand office, the grim truth is revealed. President Woo-sik drops a terrifying name: the subjugation minister of Korea. Minister Myung-in has pulled the strings. The protagonist smirks, realizing he's earned a spot on the nation's most dangerous blacklist after crippling Juhak. That brutal beatdown had serious consequences. Woo-sik deeply bows his head in apology, knowing this path of cultivation has just become infinitely bloodier. Boasting about his deep ties to the academy and his untouchable influence in the field, the president whines endlessly, but our main character coldly cuts him off. He snarls that he didn't come here to listen to an old man's pathetic grumbling. Trembling, the man asks what the young master plans to do next. The answer is simple: he will take the practical exam. After all, his fated encounter with Uni hasn't happened yet. Turning his gaze, he asks his loyal subordinate if he has any decent artifacts on hand. Even an immortal cultivator cannot enter a dungeon completely bare-handed. He states that even the most basic blade would suffice. But Woik shakes his head, claiming his inventory is completely empty. This blatant lie leaves his master narrowing his eyes in suspicion. Without hesitating, the hero snatches the man's wrist with crushing force. Does this fool really dare to deceive his absolute superior? His sharp eyes lock onto a familiar ring. He demands to know what that artifact is doing there. The president gasps in sheer shock. That was no ordinary accessory. It was the knuckle ring, an ancient relic belonging to the protagonist himself. Staring wide-eyed at the legendary item, the president breathes out his name. Wyke stammers, confessing that after his master's supposed demise, he wore the divine ring out of pure habit and simply forgot to take it off. A fleeting memory of their fateful first meeting crosses his mind. The young master ruthlessly strips the artifact from his finger, commanding him to surrender what was rightfully his. The president's face falls into a mask of profound sorrow, watching the legendary warrior reclaim his past glory. His subordinate nervously asks if such a basic weapon will truly be enough. The hero smirks. Against the trash mobs of a low-tier dungeon? This artifact is more than sufficient. Just before Jung-woo can step out of the shadows, Wyke desperately calls out to him. He begs the boy to stop visiting this dangerous territory so often, but the immortal merely scoffs, warning him not to give him a reason to show up in the first place. Meanwhile, Professor Jung-woo struts down the academy corridors with his usual arrogance. Suddenly, his footsteps halt dead in front of a secluded study room. He aggressively raps on the door and pushes it open. What awaits inside makes his arrogant smirk falter. Right in front of him sits the Ice Queen, Uni. She is fiercely typing away at a glowing terminal. The professor sneers, mocking the rare sight of her actually attending the academy. Without missing a beat, the fierce girl coldly demands to know his business. Jung-woo snarls that teachers have absolute authority here, and her rebellious attitude is completely unacceptable. But Uni treats him like invisible air. She doesn't even blink, keeping her piercing gaze locked on the screen. Veins pop on the professor's forehead as he forces a heavy sigh, trying to suppress his boiling rage. He announces that the monthly combat evaluation begins this week. The academy requires a high-ranking field inspector from the elite student council. His tone drops dangerously as he warns that this will be a brutal practical exam. Uni finally pauses, questioning if they are truly abandoning the standard written tests. The corrupt professor snaps that the pathetic details are none of her concern. He barks out a demand, asking if she will take the job. She flatly rejects him. Her cultivation schedule is already pushed to the absolute limit. He orders her to assign another council member, but she shuts him down again. Every single elite is trapped in the exact same grueling routine. Jung-woo grits his teeth, sarcastically asking if the almighty council wants him to delay the entire practical exam. Unfazed, she coolly agrees that it would be the wisest choice. She declares that if the academy is completely helpless without the council's blessing, they should just cancel the pathetic charade entirely. After all, there is absolutely zero profit in it for her faction. She fiercely asks if the academy plans to compensate them with dungeon subjugation rewards. That is the final straw. The man erupts into a furious roar, demanding to know if she thinks she sits on a throne above the faculty. He brands her an arrogant delinquent. The enraged professor claims he was her ultimate benefactor during her rookie year. He screams that without his divine grace, she would never have touched the student council. But the Ice Queen shatters his delusion instantly. She sharply reminds him that his so-called help was purely out of absolute terror for her legendary grandfather. It had nothing to do with her potential. Her voice drops to a freezing whisper, warning him that he should have approached this negotiation with proper respect. Daring to insult an elite council member is a fatal mistake. The professor stammers, demanding to know who she thinks she is. But suddenly, the door creaks open. A shadowy figure steps into the tense room. The new arrival greets the professor as Mr. Cha, his voice dripping with hidden malice. He remarks on how long it has been since their last little chat, boldly questioning the true motive behind this sudden intrusion. Swallowing his fear, the professor straightens his tie and regains his composure. He quickly explains his desperate search for a student council member to act as a combat evaluator. The mysterious boy flashes a dangerous smile. He casually volunteers to take on the burden himself. After all, the blood of the elite student council flows through his veins as well. Even the corrupt professor sweats, silently acknowledging that this particular student is a terrifying wildcard. Jung-woo hastily points out that the official documents are resting on the desk. He orders the boy to sign the soul-binding contracts and deliver them straight to the faculty office. Throughout this entire power struggle, Uni remains perfectly still, silently analyzing the chaotic scene unfolding before her. The silver-haired girl finally speaks, questioning if he wasn't scheduled for a high-rank dungeon subjugation today. The boy casually shrugs. He had a raid planned, but he is going to entirely scrap it. Her eyes widen in genuine shock. Why would he abandon precious experience points? Even if he despises that snake of a professor, why step in to save the day? The boy's smile vanishes, replaced by a cold, calculating glare. He reveals his true motive. It is the perfect excuse to keep that corrupt rat under strict surveillance. He absolutely refuses to let another catastrophic tragedy repeat itself within these academy walls. Seamlessly shifting the heavy atmosphere, he drops a massive bombshell. That arrogant rookie who dared to raise his voice at uni? He actually enrolled as a supreme special admission student. The revelation strikes Uni like a bolt of lightning. She recalls his insane audacity, utterly stunned that a complete outsider without an academy badge possessed such overwhelming aura. The council member smirks, boasting that he dug deep into the rookie's background. This monster didn't just casually crush Yuak on day one, he completely shattered his pride. And worse, this anomaly is entirely immune to the standard evaluation rules. Leaning in, he whispers, asking if the Ice Queen's frozen heart isn't burning with curiosity about this mysterious powerhouse. Fast forward a few days. The fateful morning arrives. The combat candidates are heavily gathered outside the training grounds. Our protagonist scans the battlefield with razor-sharp eyes. He immediately senses the weaklings from Class C and D have already fled in terror. Meanwhile, the arrogant elites from Class A and B are practically radiating killing intent, desperate to show off their explosive martial arts. But his own garbage-tier class? The battlefield is dead silent. He is the sole warrior standing. However, a gentle voice suddenly pierces his concentration. Someone steps from the shadows, softly asking if they will be fighting this war as a duo. As the dust settles, Ayan reveals herself. She nervously smiles, claiming that at least she won't have to wait an eternity for her turn in the arena. The immortal protagonist glares, demanding to know why a fragile girl has stepped onto this blood-soaked stage, but she stands her ground, stating the absolute obvious. She is here to conquer the trial alongside him. Clenching her fists, she vows that even if her aura is weak, she absolutely refuses to become a burden on his path to supremacy. Jung-woo's patience finally snapped. He glared at her with blazing eyes, warning her that this dungeon was an absolute death trap. He ordered her to drop the naive act immediately. Did she honestly not see the trap? This entire exam was rigged from the start, designed to crush Class E into total submission. Yet, the girl stubbornly held her ground. Her voice trembled, but carried iron resolve. She had to secure that student council seat, even if she had to lay her life on the line. Remedial classes simply would not be enough. If she backed down now, her academic standing would turn to ash. Suddenly, the instructor's voice cut through the tension. He demanded to know if the squads were prepared for deployment. He assured them the danger was minimal, but strictly ordered absolute focus and unshakable calm. The trials would unfold within an E-rank Marine classification dungeon, a realm where one mistake could still spell disaster. The rules were absolute. The students would be divided into elite combat squads of 8. Once the tactical formations were finalized, the descent into the abyss would begin. Class A would vanguard the assault, with the lower ranks trailing behind them in the shadows. But the true shock came from the overseer. The student council watchdog for this lethal exam was a terrifying figure they all recognized. Jung-yoon stepped forward, casting a chilling gaze over the fresh meat. The protagonist narrowed his eyes. That name echoed with a dark familiarity in his memories. Where had he heard that name before? Before he could connect the dots, the instructor bellowed out for Class E, with their pathetic numbers falling drastically short of the requirement. They were forcibly merged with the leftover rejects from the other tiers. Suddenly, the shadow faction loyal to Jung-woo approached. They offered a stiff greeting, sweating heavily under the pressure. They desperately tried to maintain their cover as ordinary students. Even Ayan scoffed, whispering that their acting was absolutely pathetic. Murmurs of disgust rippled through the other squads. The elite students cursed their wretched luck for drawing such dead weight. They openly sneered, declaring they would just treat the 2 zeros as invisible ghosts. Amidst the insults, one of the loyal subordinates covertly bowed his head, whispering a frantic apology to his hidden master. But Jung-woo merely smirked in the shadows. This underestimation was exactly the camouflage he needed. He coldly demanded the intel file. What secrets was this accursed dungeon hiding? Trembling, the subordinate hastily offered up a glowing tactical tablet, bowing a little too deeply. He politely begged his boss to review the data. The sheer respect in his gesture drew suspicious glares from the surrounding elites. Realizing his fatal blunder, The subordinate quickly pivoted. He barked out a fake insult, branding the protagonist a worthless punk. He aggressively ordered him to carry the bags and fetch the recon data. Crisis averted for now. Moments later, the air grew incredibly heavy. Both the instructor and the sinister Jung-woo demanded final confirmation. They expected nothing less than total mastery of the awakening combat systems. Jung-woo's voice echoed like a death knell. Survival meant only one thing: exterminating the dungeon boss. He swept his piercing gaze across the trembling weaklings. He mocked them, claiming this trial was merely child's play. Jung-woo remained utterly silent, his aura perfectly concealed. Without another word, the massive gates roared open. They stepped into the gaping maw of the abyss. The survival exam had officially begun. As the squad marched into the suffocating darkness, Jung-woo analyzed the glowing screen of the tablet. The mana readings painted a painfully obvious picture. It was a textbook subterranean labyrinth, swarming with cavern-dwelling beasts. But then, a terrifying sound echoed from the blackness. A massive horde of mutant dire rats burst from the shadows. Their bloodshot eyes locked onto the fresh prey. Panic erupted instantly. The students shrieked, scrambling desperately to form a defensive line. They screamed at each other to awaken their combat arts. Glowing system interfaces flickered to life in the dark cave. Yet, amidst the chaos, Jung-woo stood like an unmoving mountain. He calmly observed the battlefield, calculating the exact combat value of these so-called elites. A gust of wind magic violently erupted from one student. Beside him, a sniper took aim with an aura-infused slingshot. The heavy hitter of the group unleashed a primal roar. Activating his berserker skill, his muscles bulged with enhanced physical power. The disorganized counterattack finally commenced. The sniper rained down a barrage of magical projectiles, piercing through the frontline beasts. The towering berserker threw his massive body forward, acting as a meat shield for a terrified comrade. But Jung-woo could only sigh in absolute disappointment. Their synergy was a catastrophic joke. They were burning through their mana pools, blindly swinging their weapons like panicked children. These arrogant fools who dared to look down on Class E. They had absolutely zero grasp of true martial techniques. It was an embarrassing display of wasted potential. Only one fighter managed to capture the protagonist's critical eye. The stubborn girl from before. She unleashed a breathtaking torrent of blazing magic. Her azure flames danced through the cavern like deadly spirits. Each strike was calculated, incinerating the beasts with terrifying efficiency. She carved a path of ash through the monstrous wave. Multiple targets turned to dust in the blink of an eye. A spark of respect ignited within Jung-woo. Class E was systematically denied all combat instruction. She had forged this lethal power through pure, unyielding self-discipline. He smirked, acknowledging her fierce determination. For a rookie, her devastating flames were undeniably impressive, even if her foundation was still raw and unpolished. The initial wave finally broke, leaving the squad gasping for air. But the abyss is never merciful. From the blind spot, a shadow lunged. A beast bared its fangs, inches from a student's neck. In a flash of lethal intent, Jung-woo engaged his power ring. He channeled the exact same devastating force he used to crush Woo-shik. But this time, he merely flicked a jagged stone. Boom! The pebble shattered the sound barrier. It blew a gaping, bloody hole straight through the monster's skull. The saved student collapsed, his soul nearly leaving his body in sheer terror. Jung-woo coldly instructed the shaking boy. He needed to condense his aura, or he would drain his life force instantly. Instead of gratitude, toxic jealousy poisoned the cave. The exhausted elites lashed out at their savior. They accused him of cowardly kill-stealing just to farm easy merit points. They spat venom, ordering the trash ranker to stay back. An explosive aura of irritation began to leak from Jung-woo. Before he could teach them a painful lesson in respect, a voice intervened. His undercover loyalists nervously whispered through the communication link. They were sweating bullets, realizing this exam was a literal death sentence. Jung-woo violently scratched his head in pure frustration. These absolute fools were dancing on the edge of the Grim Reaper's scythe. They were utterly blind to the shadow of death looming over them. They hadn't even breached the inner chambers yet, and their mana reserves were already completely depleted. The only warrior with enough grit to push deeper into the abyss was the Azure Flame user, Ah Yun. But even she was a wild card he couldn't fully rely on. He possessed the sheer power to annihilate this dungeon solo. However, the hidden surveillance eyes of the instructors complicated his shadows. Moreover, his heightened senses flared with a chilling warning. Something deeply malevolent was festering in this dungeon. He smoothly approached the supervising instructor, dropping his facade. He pierced the man with an icy glare, questioning the twisted parameters of this test. The beasts were weak, yes, but the spawn rate was terrifyingly abnormal. They had barely crossed the threshold, yet the squad was already teetering on the brink of total collapse. An unnatural bloodlust was bleeding from the deeper levels. He demanded the supervisors step in before this exam turned into a complete massacre. "Arrogant brat," the instructor sneered. It was his absolute authority as the examiner. He scoffed, warning that this insolent attitude would inevitably invite a catastrophic accident. "Do not regret this," the protagonist muttered. The instructor turned, his voice booming. "Does anyone wish to forfeit?" Exhaustion hung heavy in the air. The students exchanged nervous glances, but their pride wouldn't allow them to surrender. Even those who had barely escaped death's door swallowed their fear. Instructor Jung-woo smirked. "See? No one is quitting." He glared at the protagonist. "If you are too weak, then drag your own feet out of here. Stop destroying the morale of your peers." His killing intent flared. "Interrupt this sacred exam one more time, and I will personally disqualify you." Suddenly, a steady hand rested on the protagonist's shoulder. A calm voice cut through the tension. It was Jung-woo. "If true danger descends, I will step in," he vowed. He smiled with a confident aura. "I may not look like much, but I am a proud member of the student council." He asked the protagonist to trust him just this once. Jung-woo simply narrowed his eyes in silence. The depths of the dungeon awaited. Whispers of excitement rippled through the party. They had finally reached the boss's chamber. A massive, imposing gate loomed before them. Yet, the crushing weight of their fatigue silenced their cheers, standing before the abyss. The protagonist let out a heavy sigh. His senses were already screaming of imminent danger. His patience was wearing dangerously thin. He stepped forward, offering to breach the gate himself. "Any objections?" he asked coldly. But Ah-in stubbornly stepped beside him. "We open it together." He warned her he could easily handle it alone, but she refused to back down. "You are probably mocking us in your head," she snapped, "thinking we are all just trembling cowards." He merely clicked his tongue, ignoring her naive pride. Together, they pushed the heavy iron doors open, but instantly, the arrogant instructor's face drained of all color. Pure, unadulterated terror gripped his soul. Lying in the center of the chamber was the mutilated corpse of a colossal rat. The dungeon boss was already dead. A chilling realization washed over the students. If the boss was slaughtered, what kind of monstrosity killed it? The instructor stuttered, asking if this was the training dungeon. Jung-woo's face darkened. "The dungeon core. It is active." The protagonist calmly approached the colossal carcass. His sharp eyes analyzed the brutal lacerations. The truth hit him instantly. "Dungeon interference," he announced coldly. Jung-woo's eyes widened in sheer horror. "Retreat! Everyone fall back!" he roared. The trainees erupted into chaotic panic. "Why? What is happening?" they cried. "It is an invasion. Run for your lives." But fate is a cruel master. From the pitch-black shadows, a mountainous silhouette emerged. The protagonist locked eyes with the apex predator. A titanic, demonic fox materialized before their very eyes. The sheer spiritual pressure brought them to their knees. Dungeon interference. A catastrophic event where an overwhelming entity slaughters the local boss and claims the territory as its own. Instructor Jung-woo and the council member trembled like autumn leaves. Ah-in was entirely paralyzed by the crushing, killing intent. The protagonist clicked his tongue at this nightmare scenario. This was an absolute disaster. The aura radiating from the beast was undeniable. A green-rank calamity, the legendary three-tailed phantom feline. A cataclysmic anomaly had occurred. A green-rank overlord had manifested inside a mere purple-rank domain. The students abandoned all pride and bolted for the exit, but the demonic beast would not let its prey escape. It launched into the air with explosive speed. The earth shattered beneath its devastating landing. The shockwave obliterated their only escape route. "Get behind me," Jung-woo commanded. He synchronized with the system. A blinding light erupted as his rank C cultivation flared to life. Deadly golden spikes materialized from the ether. A blazing, yellowish aura engulfed his entire being. This was a rare physical enhancement class, the legendary Porcupine Bloodline Awakening. Sweat poured down his face as he locked eyes with the protagonist. "I need your help. I cannot fight a green rank alone." Jung-woo's eyes widened in genuine shock. How did this senior know? The council member offered a desperate smile. "Forgive me. I have been investigating you." He knew the truth. The protagonist was an anomaly. Someone completely unbound by the Academy's evaluation system. This is not the time to hide your divine strength. Hearing this bold declaration, Jung-woo felt a massive headache coming on. How many people actually knew his secret? He vividly recalled the day of his awakening test. The system's crimson warning. Power level. Immeasurable. He had begged the association president to forge his records. Such heaven-defying talent would only paint a massive target on his back. But President Wooick had strictly refused. The system's divine judgment could not be tampered with. However, the president had offered a compromise. Keep your head down, and the instructors will treat you like trash. Because his power transcended mortal understanding. Only the highest authorities recognized his true value. The protagonist gritted his teeth in profound annoyance. I should have been more ruthless back then, he cursed inwardly. He glared at the council member. But exposing his martial prowess now would ruin everything. Jung-woo tilted his head, playing the fool. Senior, I have absolutely no idea what you are talking about. Before they could argue, a blood-curdling roar shook the cavern. The demonic feline pounced, its claws aimed for their throats. Jung-yun tracked the beast's hyperspeed movements. His martial instincts kicked in. Spotting a microscopic opening, he unleashed his aura. Dozens of golden spikes shot forward like shooting stars. Bam, bam, bam. The piercing strikes hit the creature's vital pressure points. The colossal beast staggered, its balance broken for a fraction of a second. Without hesitating, the council member launched himself. Straight into the jaws of death, he shouted, channeling his vital energy into one devastating blow. Smash! His strike connected with the demon's skull. The beast shrieked in agony as its demonic eyes burned with a golden fury. The lower realm students watched in absolute awe. Jung-yun's power was like a towering mountain they could never climb, but their admiration quickly turned to spite. Look at that specially admitted trash, one of them sneered. He is just standing there doing absolutely nothing. The senior is risking his life to protect that dead weight. But they were all blind fools. Jung-yun wasn't fighting to protect anyone. He was risking his own life, just to force the hidden god to reveal his true power. He unleashed a relentless barrage of spike attacks against the beast. But something felt incredibly strange. He had never experienced a battle quite this effortless. Dominating a formidable green-rank monster with such ease, it felt entirely unnatural, like victory was being served to him on a silver platter. Suddenly, his gaze locked with the main character. A spark of realization hit him. Was this supposedly weak student the one secretly manipulating the flow of combat? Seizing that split second of distraction, the boss lunged for a lethal strike. But instantly, the main character flicked a stone, infused with his explosive flow. The projectile shot toward the massive feline like a bullet, buying the council member just enough time to evade death. At last, the truth dawned on him. This was the exact reason the beast's deadly strikes kept failing. Every single attack had been secretly interrupted. He recalled reading about this divine technique in ancient manuals. A legendary strategy used to perfectly destabilize a monstrous opponent. But pulling it off in real combat was supposed to be absolutely impossible. Yet his mysterious companion was weaving this supreme art without anyone even noticing. Shaking off his shock, he snapped his focus back to the battlefield. Right now, survival meant concentrating entirely on the hunt. Surging forward, he channeled all his aura, burying his weapon deep into the boss's skull. A devastating critical hit. The fearsome boss had finally fallen. The students erupted into cheers, completely awestruck by the council member's incredible display of power. They began cheering his name like a true hero. Watching from afar, the teacher breathed a heavy sigh of relief. Thank the heavens the bloody tragedy from 2 years ago hadn't repeated itself. A sinister thought crossed his mind. Since Jung-woo received his combat evaluation exemption by pure luck, he would use this exact incident as the perfect excuse to expel him forever. But suddenly, the main character's voice shattered the celebration. The monster is still alive, he roared, commanding everyone to fall back immediately from the deadly threat. But absolute arrogance breeds absolute foolishness. An arrogant student named Brad mocked the warning. He recklessly leaped toward the downed beast, desperate for glory. He scoffed, claiming the main character was just trying to steal some extra combat points. Raising his weapon high, Brad arrogantly declared that the final glorious blow belonged to him alone. But in that very second, the beast's terrifying demonic eyes snapped wide open. Paralyzed by overwhelming killing intent, the foolish boy froze as the jaws of death closed in. Cursing under his breath, the main character exploded into motion, but the senior council member got there first, violently shoving the boy away just as monstrous teeth clamped down, ripping his arm clean off. A fountain of crimson blood sprayed the earth. The foolish boy stared at the severed limb, completely shattered by horror. The entire battlefield froze in absolute mind-numbing terror. The heroic senior collapsed to the cold ground, his life force rapidly draining from the massive wound. Panic erupted. Students scrambled wildly, like sheep running from a slaughterhouse. But Ah-hyun remained rooted to the spot, entirely paralyzed by dread. Her mind scrambled frantically for a survival strategy. The bloodthirsty beast locked its sights entirely on her. She desperately muttered to herself, fighting to suppress the mounting panic. She tried to force belief into her heart. Surely, her fierce fire magic could incinerate this demonic feline. But the sheer, suffocating pressure of its aura chained her down. Her breath grew heavy and ragged. A dark, despairing voice in her mind kept whispering that survival was absolutely impossible. Violent tremors racked her entire body. She could barely even stand against the crushing weight of its killing intent. The monstrous boss stretched its bloody jaws wide, lunging to devour her whole. In that heart-stopping fraction of a second, the main character unleashed the true mastery of his explosive flow. Channeling an overwhelming force, he executed a devastating hard punch technique. The sheer impact sent the massive beast rocketing violently through the air. The deafening shockwave instantly snapped the girl back to brutal reality. Her eyes widened in absolute shock as she stared at her savior. This was an entirely different presence. The monstrous creature crashed into the earth with an earth-shattering thud. She tried to call out his name, but the young man walked right past her in cold, deadly silence. Nearby, the wounded senior lay bleeding on the shattered earth, while the foolish boy who caused this tragedy sobbed pathetically over his mangled body. Disgust and terrifying coldness radiated from the main character's eyes. With a voice like glacial ice, he commanded the crying boy to shut up and drag the senior away. He ordered the chubby student to help carry the bleeding body immediately, commanding the rest of the useless spectators to cower silently in the corner. Jung-woo gritted his teeth, blaming his own foolish hesitation. He should have completely annihilated this pathetic creature by himself from the very beginning. Effortlessly weaving through the monster's desperate counterattacks, an overwhelming irritation flared inside him. The beast roared, its three menacing tails glowing with toxic purple spiritual energy. The lethal stingers whipped toward him like lightning, but he dodged every single strike as if dancing through a gentle breeze. It was time to end this. Activating his mystic ring's hidden power, spiritual energy surged into his fists. He stepped inside its guard and unleashed a devastating uppercut straight into the beast's jaw. The crushing impact shattered bone, sending fountains of dark blood into the air. But before the monster's heavy body could even hit the ground, the main character's aura exploded once more. He unleashed an absolutely merciless sequence of strikes, a storm of martial mastery that gave the boss zero chance to breathe, let alone defend. The onlooking students were completely paralyzed by awe. Even those few who knew he was hiding his abilities were profoundly shaken by the godlike scale of his true might. The arrogant teacher watched with wide, trembling eyes. Cold sweat drenched his back. What kind of unfathomable monster was he actually witnessing right now? The horrifying realization finally smashed into his narrow mind. The main character's combat exemption was absolutely no mistake. With this heaven-defying strength, he was already miles above the Academy's elite seniors. And to make matters even more terrifying, he was wielding an ancient, taboo, supernatural weapon. The teacher's voice broke as he screamed a frantic warning about the devastating dangers of such ancient relics. Jung-woo cast a brief, chilling side glance toward the pathetic man, then completely ignored him. He fully understood the teacher was panicking over the legendary weapon's heavenly punishment. Every single ancient artifact demanded a severe toll from its master's soul, a chaotic penalty that could easily drain the life force and completely obliterate a weak user. Even so, he firmly preferred walking this perilous path of cultivation. Modern hunter bracelets merely skimmed the surface power of monster cores, offering safe but pathetic abilities. But ancient supernatural weapons? They flawlessly devoured the beast core's absolute maximum potential, forging that pure, untamed energy into the ultimate instrument of destruction. Sure, the safe modern methods made it easier for weaklings to play hunter, but this pampered new generation lacked true fangs, and battling apocalyptic monsters demanded absolute, overwhelming power. But lost in his martial philosophy for just a fraction of a second, the battered beast seized the tiny opening with explosive speed. A terrifying shriek tore from the girl's throat as deadly shadows descended. Shouting a desperate warning to be careful, the demonic beast unleashes a devastating slash toward the protagonist. But miraculously, he had simply vanished from the creature's line of sight. Igniting his aura once more, He forces the massive beast to snap its gaze upward. The protagonist spirals through the air like a descending dragon. Harnessing devastating rotational force, he delivers a catastrophic strike straight down upon the monster's skull. The sheer kinetic power of the blow triggers a massive shockwave, kicking up a dense cloud of dust and debris from the devastating impact. As the smoke finally begins to clear, the young man stands undisturbed in the center of the battlefield. Jung-woo coldly glares down at the monster, while the ring's absolute curse, the fear devourer, pulses to life. The dungeon boss locks eyes with the boy's imposing figure, and the massive feline instantly begins trembling in absolute terror. The terrifying penalty of the ring takes immediate effect. Even against a formidable green rank monster, a creature the protagonist used to slaughter in the distant past, it realizes it cannot defeat him. The beast feels overwhelming fear. The cruel rule of this artifact is absolute. The first to feel fear dies. Or rather, for our hero to secure his victory, he only needs to crush his enemy's spirit. Jung-woo calmly approaches the group, asking if the student council member is still breathing. He quickly realizes the boy is alive, but his life force is draining away with every drop of blood. The protagonist immediately demands that the useless teacher hand over the radio. He needs to report this catastrophic failure to the control center. Trembling, Jung-man finally does as he is told. The pathetic man surrenders the communication device, allowing the protagonist to summon immediate rescue. With absolute composure, he alerts the operations team that the final training group has cleared the dungeon, but they have suffered a critical casualty. He reports the abnormal phenomena. The dungeon mutated from purple to green tier due to outside interference. Furthermore, a rank B3 student has suffered catastrophic blood loss. The protagonist firmly informs command that they are evacuating immediately, demanding the control center dispatch an emergency medical team. Frantic, the operators ask for the dying student's identity. He states it is a third-year cadet named Jang Yan, ordering them to immediately notify the chief in charge. Suddenly, Jung-man steps up, aggressively demanding to know the boy's true identity. Seeing that he is being completely ignored, the arrogant teacher starts screaming. He furiously demands to know exactly what the protagonist is, ordering him to answer at once. But to Jung-man's absolute shock, a fist connects ruthlessly with his jaw. Completely out of patience, Jung-woo mercilessly strikes the teacher's face. After crashing heavily to the ground, the protagonist unleashes a barrage of insults upon the pathetic man. Jung-man desperately tries to protest, but the boy coldly asks if he is truly a qualified supervisor, mocking his complete inability to analyze a life-or-death situation. With an incredibly menacing glare, he orders the cowardly teacher to shut his mouth or face dire consequences. The grown man shrinks back in overwhelming terror, wisely deciding not to test the monster's patience any further. A short time later, they are successfully evacuating the dungeon and linking up with the emergency rescue squad. Jang Yan is immediately loaded up to be rushed to the intensive care unit. Suddenly, the president urgently approaches, anxiously asking if his venerable leader is unharmed. Woo-ik notes that the boy clearly could not hold back his legendary strength. Visibly irritated, the protagonist snaps back that because he intervened, no one had to die today. His loyal subordinate sighs, complaining that this explosive display means everyone will soon discover his true identity. But the boy sharply calls the man by his name. Burning with rage, he declares that an instructor from this very academy intentionally sent unprepared students into a deadly dungeon, using them as mere pawns just to eliminate him. He furiously asks if his companion actually believes that twisted logic makes any sense. Woo-ik looks absolutely terrified as he stares into his supreme leader's eyes. Jung-woo issues a chilling warning. If a cowardly scheme like this ever happens again, he will not stand by, quietly in the shadows. He darkly orders the president not to force him out of retirement, or else his bloody active days will return. In a completely different location, the nervous teacher is standing before Woo-ik's imposing desk. Simmering with anger, the president asks if he truly believes the test went without a hitch. He sharply reminds Jung-man that he was the exact person who fiercely pushed for this dangerous practical exam. But the slippery teacher desperately claims innocence, stating there is zero connection between his decision and the bloody incident. He spouts ridiculous excuses about addressing educational inequality. The furious president cuts him off, disgusted that even in a catastrophic situation like this, the rat keeps scrambling to find excuses for his deadly mistakes. He leans in, asking if the pathetic fool honestly thought he would not figure out that this entire exam was a targeted assassination attempt against Jung-woo. The teacher flinches, utterly shocked that the president would expose his scheme so directly. Even though he knew Woo-ik might be suspicious, he nervously wonders if there is a spy hiding among the minister's inner circle. But he quickly swallows his fear, concluding that such a thing is impossible. Jung-man arrogantly insists the exam followed protocol to the letter. He claims not a single student was forced to participate in the deadly subjugation mission or intentionally exposed to mortal peril. He keeps rambling to save his own skin until the president violently slams his fist onto the table. He roars that the real issue was the suspicious last-minute switch to a practical battle test. Woo-ik coldly states that 60 points are required to pass, a score that an ex-parasis, ordinary special admission cadet could never possibly achieve. The frantic teacher snaps back that Jung-woo is no ordinary student, pointing out that despite having received an evaluation exemption, he still completely dominated as the absolute best in this trial. Jung-man fiercely doubles down, claiming this was nothing more than an unpredictable tragedy caused by a natural disaster known as dungeon interference. Furthermore, he desperately plays his final card, reminding the man that this test was officially approved by the president himself. Completely out of patience and arguments, Woo-ik falls deadly silent. Slowly closing his eyes to contain his simmering wrath, he mutters that it is fine. He orders the sweaty teacher to submit a full incident report by the end of the day. He declares that he and the operations team will meticulously review the body cam footage and make their final, undeniable decision. The arrogant teacher bows and leaves the room, foolishly convinced he just got away with murder. But suddenly, the president's heavy voice echoes out, saying he must make one thing perfectly clear. With an icy glare, he states that he does not fear Minister Mujin's petty power. He confesses that in this entire world, the only existence he truly fears is Jung-woo. From 40 years ago, the confused teacher freezes, asking what those cryptic words could possibly mean. Woo-ik offers one final, chilling warning. If a stunt like this ever happens again, no one will be able. The teacher stood frozen outside the room. A cold sweat dripped down his spine. He was completely overwhelmed by what he had just witnessed. Finally taking a trembling breath, he nervously loosened his tie. His hands shook as he dialed the academy minister. He desperately assured the official that the incident would be buried deep in the shadows. Thanks to corrupt connections in the mortal police force, the blame had successfully missed the academy elders. But the minister had far more sinister concerns. He coldly reminded the teacher that the boy was never an official candidate anyway. The academy should be bowing in gratitude for how fate had played out. Panic laced the teacher's voice as he bowed to the phone. He brought up the special admission student, his voice cracking. The boy's martial prowess was simply monstrous, defying all heavenly logic. The minister's tone grew sharp and dangerous. Did this mere disciple truly possess enough power to break the sect's foundation? The teacher swallowed hard, struggling to explain the unexplainable. But the corrupt official cut him off with a chilling truth. Speaking as a shadow ruler of the parent council, he declared that the first-year student council seats were already rigged. The hierarchy was set in stone by the elite bloodlines. He demanded the teacher's absolute obedience. Bowing to the pressure, the spineless instructor agreed to execute their dark will. Satisfied with his puppet's loyalty, the minister offered fake praise for his grueling work. He casually invited him to an elite gathering, masking his tyranny with a smile. As the call disconnected, the instructor collapsed against the wall, gasping for air. His mind flashed back to the protagonist's overwhelming, suffocating aura. That monster was no ordinary student. His combat mastery rivaled seasoned sect elders. Still, the teacher's life was on the line, and he had to find a way to eliminate Jung-woo. Meanwhile, deep within the academy's grand medical pavilion, our supposedly invincible protagonist was locked in a terrifying struggle. He stared wide-eyed at an incoming threat. A relentless nurse dabbed alcohol onto his minor scratch. The fearsome regressor let out a pathetic, high-pitched shriek. The healer sighed, ordering him to stay still until the spiritual medicine dried. If his life force started leaking again, he was to summon her immediately. Watching this shameful display, An rolled her eyes. She teased him mercilessly for whining like a baby over a tiny mortal wound. Annoyed, he snapped back that pain was an absolute truth. But deep down, a heavy thought clouded his mind. Was his physical shell weakening because his divine weapons were sealed away? Or had this regression completely altered his bodily foundation? Shaking off the ominous thoughts, Jung-woo glared at the persistent girl. She had been haunting his recovery ward every single day. He demanded she leave him in peace to cultivate his energy. With a sly grin, she promised to vanish forever, but only if he lent her his strength. He groaned, realizing her ambition hadn't wavered. Was she truly still chasing that cursed student council throne? How many times did he have to reject her desperate quests? He coldly stated that her political battles were not his karmic burden. He had a world to save, and zero time to babysit a junior's academy dreams. Suddenly, a weak voice drifted across the room, claiming that conquering the council was an easy path. But the tone held a bitter, tragic edge. A pale hand reached out, pulling back the heavy medical curtains. The girl blinked in pure shock, recognizing the wounded upperclassman. She had heard whispers of his transfer to this very healing ward. With deep concern, they asked if Jung-yun's vital energy was finally stabilizing. He forced a tired, empty smile. The Grim Reaper had missed him this time, though the agony still burned his veins. The injured senior looked toward the protagonist. He asked if the cowardly disciple they saved had truly fled the sect. Right after surviving the brutal combat trials, Jung-woo scoffed in absolute disgust. The fool had vanished without uttering a single word of gratitude to his savior. Yet Jong-yun just chuckled softly, lacking any malice. Surviving the bloodbath was a victory in itself, he reasoned. The protagonist stared at him, bewildered by this boundless, foolish optimism. How could someone smile so warmly after sacrificing an entire arm to the darkness? The crippled senior fell silent, a profound look swirling in his eyes. He recalled the ancient wisdom passed down by his father. As long as breath remains in your lungs, no earthly tribulation is too great. Flashing a bright grin, he declared that cheating death meant his destiny was still his to forge. The sheer purity of his spirit left our battle-hardened regressor utterly speechless. In his long, blood-soaked past life, untainted souls like this were practically a myth. Honestly, he had suspected the boy of hiding some demonic motive at first. It had been centuries since anyone had spoken such genuine, heavenly words of hope. Breaking the heavy silence, An circled back to his earlier warning. Why was reaching the council peak so impossibly difficult? Jung-yun sighed, admitting he had eavesdropped on their bickering. He warned her that claiming a seat of power was practically a death sentence now. She frowned, wondering if her low-tier Class E ranking was holding her back. He shook his head grimly. Her talent level was entirely irrelevant to this rigged game. The true shadow hiding behind the academy walls was something far worse. Had they ever heard the cursed name of the parent association? An shuddered at the dark aura suddenly surrounding those words. This was clearly no ordinary gathering of noble elders. The senior nodded heavily, preparing to reveal the sect's darkest secret. The inner circle consisted of 5 absolute powerhouses, 5 supreme families, perfectly matching the 5 available thrones within the first-year student council. It was an orchestrated monopoly of raw power. These untouchable overlords had already carved up the academy's future for their arrogant heirs. Outsiders were nothing but stepping stones to be crushed. An gasped, realizing the impossible odds stacked against her. Was that corrupt system how he had earned his silver badge? He bitterly denied it, explaining he was merely a discarded pawn. He had only crawled into a reserve slot when a rare vacancy miraculously appeared. The protagonist scoffed, recognizing this classic villainous trope. Wealthy elites always manipulated the heavens to eliminate their rivals. They would ruthlessly slaughter anyone who dared reach beyond their station. The air in the room grew freezing cold. Suddenly, Jong-yun asked a terrifying question. Had innocent blood ever been spilled in these elections? The tragic answer was already written in the empty space where his arm used to be. With a sorrowful gaze, the senior offered a final, desperate warning. For the sake of her own life, he begged the junior girl to surrender her dream, abandon the council, or face a gruesome, untimely end. But a fierce fire ignited in her eyes. She completely refused to bow down, her righteous fury exploding at the overwhelming injustice. How many innocent disciples had to fall for this rigged, demonic game? She spun around, locking her desperate eyes onto the regressor. Didn't his blood boil at this pathetic display of tyranny? He saw the truth clearly. The rot inside this academy was a venomous snake, feasting on its own students' lives. A part of him wanted to shatter the corrupt heavens right then and there. But the looming resurrection of Gatgana was a far greater, apocalyptic threat. He crossed his arms, stubbornly insisting he had no time for petty academy politics. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. A gentle voice broke the suffocating tension, announcing perfect timing. Standing right behind them was the elegant, mysterious figure of Un. Jung-yun smiled warmly, revealing she was his honored guest. She stepped gracefully into the room, shifting the atmosphere entirely. Both the regressor and the junior stood absolutely paralyzed. The protagonist's mind raced, completely blindsided by this unexpected karmic twist. The gears of destiny were turning rapidly once again. Jung-woo slowly rose to his feet, closing the distance between them. Locking eyes with her, he whispered that it had been a very long time since their last bitter encounter. But the young girl ignores him completely, marching straight toward her estranged sister. Ah-yeon breaks the heavy silence, stating that 2 years have passed since Yoon-hee demanded she abandon her cultivation and leave the academy. Defiantly, she asks what her older sister plans to do, now that her enrollment is already set in stone. But the elite council member remains completely silent. Jin-woo and Jung-hyun stand on the sidelines, watching the intense family drama unfold. Jin-woo mutters that he has no clue about their dark history. However, the suffocating resentment between the sisters is undeniable. Perhaps this deep-seated grudge is the exact reason Ah-yeon is so hell-bent on clawing her way into the student council. The younger sister turns her back, coldly announcing her departure. Jin-woo raises an eyebrow, asking if she is really retreating so soon. Surprisingly, Yoon-hee's icy facade cracks for a second, asking if her little sister is injured anywhere. Ah-yeon stiffens, quickly composing her emotions before biting back. She asks if Yoon-hee is seriously going to pretend to care now. Jung-hyun, desperately trying to shatter the unbearable tension, steps forward and awkwardly asks if the two are close. But both Jin-woo and the furious sister treat him like invisible air, their gazes locked in a silent war. Mentally, the poor senior confesses that he cannot endure this atmosphere any longer. The sheer pressure is practically suffocating him. The council member finally turns away, declaring she is going for a walk to clear her head. But Jin-woo immediately challenges her, demanding they step outside for a private chat. Without a single word, both walk right past Jung-hyun, leaving the bewildered senior completely alone in the room. He stands there frozen, utterly clueless about the storm that just passed. Out in the desolate hallway, the two finally face off in absolute silence. The senior girl narrows her eyes, demanding to know exactly what his problem is. Internally, Jin-woo curses his lack of preparation. He never actually planned how this critical confrontation would play out. He hesitates for a fraction of a second. Should he just demand an audience with the old master? Or fake a polite introduction? He quickly concludes that such cheap tricks will not work on her. Yoon-hee breaks the silence, stating she heard a wild rumor. Did he truly annihilate the subjugation exam all by himself? She demands the truth. Jin-woo smoothly denies the claim, insisting his senior carried the entire battle and he merely delivered the final strike. But the sharp-eyed girl refuses to buy his humble act. She notes that surviving such a chaotic battlefield requires extraordinary hidden talent. She smugly implies that her past advice was the key to his survival. The sheer arrogance in her tone sparks a flare of annoyance deep within Jin-woo's chest. Her condescending attitude toward Jung-hyun is pushing him right to the edge. Sporting a fearless smirk, he tells the elite senior that her ego is scraping the heavens. Her aura sharpens instantly. She coldly asks if he is actively trying to provoke her wrath. Jin-woo waves off the threat, casually stating he only sought her out to negotiate a truce. Yoon-hee scoffs, questioning if this is just a pathetic ploy to join the student council. She accuses him of begging for political connections, assuring him that his monstrous raw talent makes such scheming completely unnecessary. He fires back without missing a beat. The petty politics of the council hold absolutely zero interest for him. Her eyes darken with warning as she demands he listen to her next words carefully. Unleashing a wave of furious killing intent, she snarls that his ambitions mean nothing to her. But if he dares to use her little sister as a pawn, there will be hell to pay. Jin-woo's patience finally snaps like a dry twig. He barks that the two stubborn sisters are exactly the same. Neither of them listens to reason, constantly dragging outsiders into their toxic family drama. He bluntly states that the only one obsessed with the council seat is Ah-yeon. Changing the subject, the young cultivator declares that he actually needs to resolve a crucial matter with her legendary grandfather. Before the words even leave his mouth, she closes the distance in a flash, violently slamming him against the concrete wall. Yoon-hee's grip is like iron. She demands he spit out every single word her sister told him. Did Ah-yeon beg him for combat support? Or is she plotting a bloody revenge against her own blood? Irritated by the ambush, Jin-woo channels his internal aura, planting his foot firmly against the wall. He borrows her momentum to completely reverse their positions, tossing the elite senior backward with terrifying ease. But Yoon-hee is no amateur. Mid-air, she twists her body with acrobatic grace, launching a devastating knee. Strike aimed right at his skull. Jin-woo instantly releases his grip, crossing his arms just in time to block the bone-crushing impact. Yoon-hee follows up with a relentless flurry of strikes, forcing him to retreat a step. The hallway falls dead silent as they glare at one another. Jin-woo's heart races. This martial prowess is vastly different from their previous encounter. He quickly realizes the truth. Her mastery of technique is absurdly advanced for a mere academy student. Without warning, she dashes forward like a phantom, preparing a lethal palm strike. Slipping past her deadly attack by a hair's breadth, Jin-woo admits his grave miscalculation. He completely underestimated her true power. Why did she hide these divine skills during the public subjugation event? Ducking under a vicious high kick, the young master finally spots a microsecond opening in her guard. In a flash of tactical genius, he begins to unravel the heavy bandage, wrapping his forearm. With a flick of his wrist, he whips the cloth directly into her field of vision. Blinded for a crucial second, she fails to notice his shadow, slipping behind her. In the blink of an eye, his arm is locked tight around her neck. Pinned helplessly against the cold wall, she gasps, asking if assault breaks academy rules. Jin-woo chuckles darkly, whispering into her ear to ask if this corrupt academy even enforces rules. Regaining her breath, she sneers that for a lowly special admission student, he adapts terrifyingly fast. A crowd begins to gather, whispering as the two prodigies remain locked in their tense standoff. Shifting the topic back to the subjugation, Yoon-hee claims the real battlefield is nothing like his naive fantasies. Raw survival means absolutely nothing. In this twisted society, all that matters is putting on a spectacular show to captivate the noble sponsors. Jin-woo absorbs her cynical worldview, staring at her in piercing silence. Annoyed by his unreadable gaze, she demands to know exactly what he wants from her. The young cultivator shrugs, acting as if his impossible request is merely a trivial favor. He just needs her to arrange a meeting. With her legendary grandfather, Jin-woo boldly states that he needs high-grade artifact weapons transferred to his headquarters. Her eyes widen in absolute disbelief, immediately shooting down the insane idea as utterly impossible. Undeterred, the protagonist argues his case. He knows the divine armaments are currently just rotting as museum displays. Surely, the supreme director of the support faction, her esteemed grandfather, could easily pull some strings to mobilize a few blades? Suddenly, a panicked academy nurse rushes down the hall, begging the two powerhouses to cease their violent brawl. Yoon-hee ignores the staff, fiercely whispering that convincing the old master is a fool's errand. The frantic nurse warns them that shedding blood in the medical wing will result in severe punishment. Startled by the sudden authority figure, Jin-woo momentarily drops his intense martial focus. Seizing the split-second distraction, the senior girl slaps his arm away with a burst of aura, finally breaking free from his iron chokehold. Without a single backward glance, she strides down the corridor in icy silence. Jin-woo calls out, confidently promising that their paths will cross again very soon. Her voice echoes back through the hall, swearing she hopes to never lay eyes on his face again. A confident smirk spreads across his face, knowing destiny has already bound their fates together. An impossible task, especially since she carries Soku's terrifying bloodline. Returning to his hospital ward, his confidant immediately asks if the negotiations bore any fruit. The main character just shakes his head in defeat. I figured as much, the boy sighs. Jung-woo narrows his eyes, questioning if Yoon's bond with the patriarch is truly that shattered. Jungin shakes his head. It is not about love or hate, he explains. Their dynamic is strictly transactional. The main character raises an eyebrow. So, zero familial warmth? His friend nods grimly. Pausing for a moment, the boy asks, what actually went down? I needed her to pull a favor from Soku, he mutters, but she shot it down instantly. His friend lets out a bitter laugh. Saying that is no surprise. She has never once begged that monster for a crumb of help. Besides, the old man's aura is terrifying. Jungin warns that this is a dangerous taboo, and the hospital walls have ears. The boy suddenly bursts into laughter. This is entirely your fault for making such an absurd and arrogant demand. He jokingly offers to bribe her, but Jungin scoffs. Yoon is sitting on an empire. Wealth means absolutely nothing to her. However, his voice drops to a conspiratorial whisper. There is exactly one bait she might bite. Intrigued, the boy leans in. Her sister, Ah In. Dropping out of the academy, he admits the exact motive is a mystery, But Yoon absolutely despises seeing her little sister walk those hallowed halls. He recalls the pure venom in her eyes when she heard "Ah-in" aimed for the student council. A sinister grin spreads across the boy's face. If we can just manipulate the younger sister into quitting, Yoon will owe us everything. Suddenly, Jung-woo raises a hand. Silence falls. Just beyond the door, Ah-in had heard every single word of their cruel calculation. Outside, beneath the cold moonlight, she slumps onto a bench, the weight of her own weakness crushing her spirit. Echoes of their scheme ring in her ears. She clenches her fists, her soul screaming in frustration. Her true desire? To ascend to the student council, to look Soku in the eye, and make that tyrant pay for his sins. But reality is a bitter pill. With her current cultivation level, surviving, the academy alone is a pipe dream. She needed Jung-woo, a monster whose power defied common sense. But the despair seeps into her bones. Why would a transcendent genius like him waste his time on a failure without reaping massive benefits? It is fine, she whispers, tears threatening to fall. It has always been this way. I am fated to walk this path alone. But before the darkness could swallow her, a shadow looms over her. Who permitted you to drown in self-pity? The cold voice cuts through the night air. You are too pathetic for someone so weak. Jung-woo stares down at her. Running away with your tail between your legs? Startled, she stammers that she was leaving. He drops onto the bench, his piercing gaze locking onto her soul. Were you thinking of submitting to your fate? A chill runs down her spine. Her sorrow violently morphs into blazing defiance. I would rather die than give up, she snaps. A predator's smirk spreads across the main character's face. Exactly the fire I was looking for. He gazes into the dark sky, his smile turning wicked. I had a little spar with your beloved sister today. Ah-in's eyes widen in absolute shock. You crossed blades with Yun? Jung-woo casually nods. Her martial arts are not just for show, but the dynamic between us is twisted now. Our first encounter was a disaster, and our second clash only threw fuel on the fire. His eyes gleam with a dangerous light. So, diplomacy is dead. I am shifting my strategy, from negotiation to absolute extortion. Ah-in recoils, calling him a completely ruthless scumbag. Swallowing hard, she asks how he intends to blackmail a monster like Yoon. Simple, Jung-woo replies. I will exploit her absolute breaking point. Confused, Ah-in asks if her perfect sister even has a flaw. He slowly points a finger right at her. You, he declares. You are her fatal flaw. Jung-woo commands her to wake up and see the truth. Your sister is the absolute monarch of the students. An elite cultivator standing at the very apex of this academy. The chosen heir of a terrifying bloodline. Why would an untouchable goddess like Yoon care so obsessively about a bottom-tier nobody like you? You could cultivate for a millennium and never brush the hem of her robes. He leans closer, his voice dropping. Why is she so desperate to purge you from the Hunter Academy? Does your mere existence threaten her flawless reputation? Or is she secretly terrified that the weak little sister will one day steal her throne? Ah-in shakes her head frantically. I know my own limits. That is completely absurd. But the main character's aura flares, as he commands. Then force it to make sense. The sheer dominance in his voice stops her breath. You must elevate your standing until you become a legitimate threat to Yoon's reign. Only then will her true weakness shatter. Ah-in is left completely speechless. Her jaw drops at the sheer insanity of his vision. What? Lacking the courage to forge your own destiny? Ah-in bites her lip, a war raging in her mind. Then, overwhelmed by the pressure, she screams, I cannot do it. It is impossible. The little psychopath merely flashes a demonic grin. He casually stands up, brushing off his coat. If that is your limit, then fade back into the shadows. We are done. Jung-woo turns his back. The gears of fate are already turning, he warns. Starting tomorrow, hell is coming to the academy. Brace yourself. He tosses a final declaration over his shoulder. My ultimate goal? To drag you onto the student council ballot, before the second semester even breathes its first breath. What are you plotting? She cries out. Jung-woo chuckles deeply. Exactly the madness you are, picturing in your head. The main character's gaze sharpens into a blade. The Parents' Association requires a sacrificial lamb. Do you grasp the weight of this game? As he disappears into the gloomy night, Ah-in screams his name, Hot tears of gratitude and fierce determination streamed down her face. "Thank you, for everything." The arrogant cultivator merely waves a dismissive hand, not even bothering to look back. Scene change. Inside a high-end sushi pavilion, an elder sips his sake. Is Taeyun handling the pressure? A noble chuckles. Youthful arrogance is natural, but I fear the boy has lost his absolute edge since ascending to Class A. The elite gathering of power players continues debating the brutal practical exams, bragging over their heirs across a feast fit for emperors. Suddenly, the sliding doors snap open. A breathless figure rushes into the private chamber. It is the academy instructor, bowing deeply to beg forgiveness for his delay. The nobles gesture for him to take a seat, immediately pressing him for. Jem let out a steady breath, assuring everyone they were perfectly fine. They confessed their deep fear that the recent incident might disrupt the sacred council selection. Yet, at this very table, gathered together were all the powerful elders and parents of the first-year association. The presiding master finally broke the heavy silence, asking if they were ready to begin, discussing the true matter of destiny at hand. Fellow cultivators, did you enjoy this epic chapter of the journey? I was absolutely captivated. If you wish to witness the next stage of ascension, make sure to forge your bond by subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. Until our paths cross again in the next legendary tale. My friends, he was an absolute legend, the most unrivaled hunter to ever walk the earth. But even legends bleed. He met his tragic end after slaying the ultimate boss monster.